Hello.
Hello, we are live.
Awesome.
We got that
Let
thing
us.
going. I can go give us a little music too.
Hello. Oh shit.
Hello.
There's me. Let me mute that.
All right. And then would
Um,
you mind sending me that one other link via WhatsApp because if I try to open it from Discord, my browser crashed from earlier. If I try to
sure.
open it in Discord, it's going to show the link in all of our other chat where your face is supposed to be.
Okay. Cool. I will. I'll get you on WhatsApp.
Sounds great.
Which ones you want me to send on WhatsApp?
Well, I have the cat. I have the Cat in the Hat one, and I
So you just
have
want the political camps?
yeah, just the political camps one.
Cop
It's like,
guns.
yeah, we're not actually in the United States, at least the article contends, dividing ourselves into left and right anymore. At least not in the traditional sense of left and right.
See. Alrighty. I am getting you paste. Yep, I sent it.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yep, no problem.
All
No
right.
problem.
As soon as I'm done pouring myself some coffee, I'll be ready to discuss it.
Awesome.
It's my crutch, you see. That's what I do to be social, is I drink my coffee.
Great.
All right. So, I'll actually put the link in the description too.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
All right, this is today's two main political camps are pro-thought versus anti-thought. So this talks about how left and right really aren't what people are
Fighting
dividing
over.
themselves along anymore, dividing themselves
Right.
by.
Right.
All
Yep.
right, there we
And yeah,
go.
would it be fair to say that they did not really, they didn't really, the article does not come from a political stance. Like, they don't really talk about whether they are left or right, etc. too much.
At least not
It's
from what I
focused.
was able to see.
Okay. Okay. Because I got that impression, which I was happy about actually, because I think that shows kind of a step back from sort of the what we're used to. you know.
Yeah, where everybody has to go and put their own political spin on everything that comes out of their mouth.
Yeah. Yeah.
I see. I unabashedly do have a political spin, or at least I'm wise enough to admit that I can't
Right.
eliminate my bias from my
No,
speech and stuff, but I'll definitely try to present an objective case. But I know that if ever push comes to shove, I'm going to come down on the side of maximizing freedom,
yeah.
even if it does have deleterious consequences in the short term.
Yeah.
I think giving people the
I'll come
opportunity
back.
to learn and to grow and to become autonomous, self-sufficient human beings takes priority over getting all the minutiae organized for the sake of everybody in accordance with some central plan, just that other people don't have to experience some perceived discomfort.
Yeah.
But anyhow,
Agreed.
the article. The contention is today's two main political camps are pro-thought versus anti-thought. The usual political labels of left and right cannot explain the exploding attacks on freedom of speech and conscience that are running rampant today. People are either pro-thought or anti-thought. The Supreme Court's contortions on the Masterpiece Cake Shop case should dispel any doubts about this. Defendant Jack Phillips has chosen not to create an artistic cake for a same-sex ceremony because doing so would violate his conviction that marriage is the sacred union of one man and one woman. As David Harsanya noted in The Federalist, the Supreme Court avoided the core issues of freedom of thought and speech while ruling for Phillips. Phillips only won his case because the Supreme Court found that Colorado didn't display religious neutrality when punishing him for his beliefs. So, the usual political labels of left and right cannot explain the exploding attacks on freedom of speech and conscience that are running rampant today. The war on speech is basically a war on thought. Let's review just a few examples that confirm power elites' interest in abolishing freedom of thought. And here's 5 different points, which I think is definitely enough for us to have a little something to talk about.
Yeah.
On college campuses, administrators increasingly permit and expect students to disrupt and even riot at talks by invited speakers and scholars some deem politically incorrect. At Google, software engineer James Damore was summarily fired for expressing a politically incorrect opinion, despite his copious citations of facts to back up his thesis. At The Atlantic Monthly, writer Kevin Williamson was quickly fired for publicly expressing a politically incorrect opinion, despite the fact that his opinion was well known before his firing, and that he was actually hired in part for his reputation as a talented provocateur. At Mozilla, activists forced the resignation of CEO Brendan Eich when they discovered that he privately donated to a politically incorrect cause, California's Proposition 8, which in 2008 confirmed the legal definition of marriage as the union of one man and one woman. Eich chose to resign rather than to recant his thoughts. In New York City, fines of up to $250,000 if you misgender a person.
Okay, that one's really ridiculous. What's the context? Do you know the context of that? Like, who can get fined? Like, and
All right,
like, what are the
here's the article. This is according to the Daily Caller.
Okay.
Calling a person she instead of Z could be grounds for a $250,000 fine in New York City. Hang tight. I need to
Yeah.
be able to scroll down. There we are. In New York City, under a new civil rights guidelines published just before Christmas last year, which ban the misgendering of individuals. Discrimination based on gender identity has been illegal in New York since 2002, but last week the New York Commission on Human Rights released a new set of guidelines that specify the many ways one can violate the law. The guidelines apply to employment, housing, and public accommodations, though some exceptions exist for particularly small employers and for religious organizations. New York officials claim the new policy makes it the most aggressive city in the country in terms of protecting the rights of the transgendered. New York has always been a diverse and welcoming city, and our laws are designed to protect every New Yorker, regardless of their gender identity, Mayor Bill de Blasio said in a statement. The Commission's detailed write-up of the new rule provides several examples of how a company could misgender somebody and thereby incur a hefty fine. 1. Repeatedly referring to a person by something other than their chosen title, such as Mr. or Miss. The policy doesn't explicitly state how gender-neutral titles such as MX, mix, I suppose that is, should be treated, though it is implied such titles must be used if a person desires it. Refusing to call a person by their chosen pronoun. So now we're using we're using the plural instead of the singular by saying a person and their. Okay, so said pronouns not only include he and she, but also explicitly include gender-neutral ones such as z and her, HIR, here, her. I don't know what that is, if that is what they desire. 3. Requiring a person to legally change their name before using their preferred alternative. For example, company may not insist on calling an employee John if he prefers Jane, even if John is his legal name. 4. Requiring a person to prove they have begun gender transition treatment before referring to them by alternative pronouns, names, and titles. I mean, I got an easy solution to that. It's called just if people don't want to deal with those kinds of people, then go somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at least don't, I mean, I wouldn't say you go out of your way to be deliberately hurtful, but I don't think that the law should compel you to say or not to say something.
No.
I think that's a line that just shouldn't be transgressed, because once there's a precedent of the state being able to require certain kinds of speech, or to
Yeah, they can push that boundary.
Exactly. So, you know, one day they might be doing it for something noble, and another day they might be doing it for something wrong or blatantly wrong. So the best thing to do is at least I believe the best thing to do is let people sort these sorts of things up by themselves, so that eventually they don't wind up being in a place where one would say, yeah, I'm actually oppressed.
Right.
But it's one little thing at a time where people give up their freedoms, and then people, by the time they actually are put into a position of oppression, it's like the frog in the cooker analogy. By the time they discover the water
Yeah.
is boiling, it's too late. So
Yep.
even though it may sound nice and it may sound compassionate,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
quite a destructive trail to go on.
It actually is a slippery slope. Yeah, for sure.
Well, yeah, I've been doing so much talking. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So let me think. Let me go to it. I really like how you brought up precedents, and the slippery slope that basically any, like, obviously this kind of looks like a banal case, right? Like, it's sort of like, okay, well, if someone wants to be called by something, it makes sense that, like, maybe, like, I could see how people could support both sides of it, is all I'm going to say. I'm not going to say my stance on it. I don't really have one in particular, but this, it is kind of like, the thing is that it is, it's under the guise of something kind of, okay, well, this looks noble, but it is in the end limiting free speech, and it's acting as though the person in question who's getting, oppressed, or whatever word you want to use,
Mm-hmm.
that it's acting as if they are powerless and can't move to, you know like, it's acting as if they have no, power over this situation, and that government intervention isn't necessary. I would contend that the government does not need to get involved in that sort of thing, um, because, as you said, it is the censorship of free speech, and the same thing with the baker, right? Like, yeah, who the person who basically would not give, or they would not do a wedding cake for a gay couple, right? Um, the fact of the matter is that person is they are suffering the consequences naturally of that, with that decision. Since gay people are getting married now, they're in the market for wedding
Mm-hmm.
cakes. So
Yep.
when you're denying them, you're actually cutting off a portion of your buyers. So it is, in a way, kind of shooting themselves in the foot, and they suffer those consequences. And it is their conviction. If, like, say, this is not my belief, but let's say that I didn't think gay marriage should be allowed, right? And, like, I was convicted that was, to me, that was not the case. Like, that's my, like, religious stance, etc.
Mm-hmm.
I should be allowed to exercise that. Uh, like, it'd feel really bad to be forced to do something that you think is immoral, right? Like, no one likes to go against their values. So, you're literally like, you're basically, bottling people's values up, and suppressing them in that way. And again, these are sort of, banal cases, but what was the Supreme Court's ruling on that? He did get it his way, right? The baker,
He got his way, but the Supreme
but
Court
it
didn't
was
actually
not because
rule in such a way that it was actually favorable to free speech. It ruled that way simply because they thought the
that
opinion of the Supreme Court was that Colorado was overstepping their bounds in terms of infringing upon the actual right of the baker to religious expression in that
right
one particular scenario. That they were being
scenario,
discriminatory in that scenario.
right,
So basically, as long as you're not wielding the sword too strongly, I suppose that sword is there's still a legal reason to assume that that sword can still be wielded.
right,
And Warren Dew makes an interesting point. He says, it strikes me that every example in the article is the left warring against thought. That doesn't mean the left is the only source of suppression of thought, but it leaves that open as a possibility. Okay, here's one. Small towns in which people believe that unquestioningly engaging in military activity upon an executive order or something from Congress is your duty, regardless of whether something is moral or not. That's
Yeah.
something that would definitely be something that would, in a different context, be a case in which the right would want to
Mm-hmm.
infringe upon people's freedom of speech. People don't want to be able to talk against the military. And frankly, I think that talking against veterans is a horrible thing to do. But if you want to talk about whether or not a war is a good foreign policy, because
Mm-hmm.
essentially it's a foreign policy implementation. It's like, how are we going to engage in the application of force?
Yeah.
If criticizing that, saying something like, I don't think we should have gone into Iraq because there weren't any weapons of mass destruction found, or something of that nature, that people immediately go and say, "Oh, well, you're just hating on our soldiers." Well, no, I'm not.
All
Well,
right.
you should be banned. You shouldn't be able to do that. That's
I have
hate speech.
I have another example
Uh huh.
of the right doing something of that. Um, so we talked about it in a sociology class in college, and it was quite interesting. So obviously in the current political climate, there's been a lot of like sort of like the Black Lives Matter movement and the police brutality thing, right?
Uh huh.
And there were the football players who took a knee during the national anthem, right? Which is, like what they're doing there, it's a nonviolent, peaceful protest. They're not happy with things how are, regardless
No.
of what's right and wrong. What they're doing is not infringing on anyone, right? They're just okay. This is what
No, it's a peaceful
They're
protest. It might be
yeah,
disrespectful to certain other people, but it is not harming them in any
right.
way.
And one of the major rebuttals I've seen to that I saw in the class, a lot of people were saying they were like, you know, you're disrespecting soldiers, basically. They said it like that. Those are the people saying it. And um, the thing is, and I think the thing there is that soldiers don't serve our country. They're not asking for respect. They're doing it out of their own volition, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
when they, at the end of the day, they don't care if the other person, is respecting them or not. They're doing it because they think it's right, and it's internal. So
Yep.
whether or not the soldiers are being indirectly disrespected is completely irrelevant. And like a true, in my opinion, a true soldier is not going to care. They're going to be like, okay, like I'm just going to keep serving my country regardless. Like I don't need someone to, I don't need someone to worship me. I'm not, infallible. I don't need to be, like I'm not free from criticism or something like that. Like and that was the thing. The right was not very, very happy about these protests from what I heard. I'm not very politically knowledgeable, but
Oh no,
like,
no, they weren't. And there are many people who are on the right in my family, for example, and in my friends groups that were. It took a little bit of explaining to convince them that I think that respecting the flag is one thing if you actually understand what it is that you're doing in terms of the significance. You might realize that you're technically making a different message than what you think that you're making. But if everybody understands you in a certain way, then well, I guess you are still making the intended message. Number one,
mhm.
and then number two, that they have the right to freedom of speech. So
Yeah,
even though I may
exactly,
disagree with whatever the message is through whatever convoluted thought process I have, or whatever convoluted thought process they have, or even if we do understand each other perfectly and I just don't happen to like what the message might be, I'm still not going to stand in the way of them saying it.
exactly. And
Now,
and that
that
was
doesn't
my
mean I have to go and pay money to go and see an NFL game if the NFL has hired people like that, and then if the NFL decides to can people because people don't want to see them anymore, well, they should be allowed to do that too. and then the other people, then they can get jobs on talk shows where they get to, get about the same kind of a salary and talk about the reasons why they did that. I mean, nobody would lose, but
Right.
people get their panties in a wad over these sorts of things that maybe should just be solved as personal problems rather than matters
Right.
of policy.
And the thing is, if it was left alone, who I don't think, first of all, I don't think they're going to be losing out on a substantial amount of supporters, because the supporters aren't, I wouldn't think would get mad at the team. They'll get mad at the players doing it. And well, I mean, that depends on the circumstance, but yeah, so they won't get extreme. They'll get mad at the players doing it. The players doing it will, suffer whatever consequences that come from that. Maybe, and that is a necessary part of our government, is the ability of free speech to kind of self-correct. And in the end, the people arguing, like saying, hey, the people who are kind of ironically saying, okay, well, you're disrespecting the soldiers, you're disrespecting America, like you shouldn't be allowed to do that. They're disrespecting America in the sense that they are, taking away the First Amendment, right? The right to speech. Like they're crossing that, and that, you would think that if you're going against essentially like one of the essential like axioms of our government, you'd think that would also be considered an affront.
Yeah,
And
soldiers are there to defend the Constitution, first and
right,
foremost.
exactly.
Warren has another point he's making here. He said, I'm a veteran. I'll address Matt's point first. I have no problem for being criticized. I do think it's hypocritical to criticize the Iraq War and pretend that you aren't also criticizing the men who voluntarily served in it. Go ahead and criticize both. I don't care. However, I don't think anyone on the right think people should be jailed for criticizing the Iraq War or servicemen. Well, I think that it depends on how far right you go and what group of people you give the microphone to. I'm not going to say that the majority of people on the right think that people should be jailed for their thoughts, and I'm even going to step out and say I don't think that the majority of people on the left think that people should be jailed or have six-figure fines imposed for refusal to bake a wedding cake for a gay couple.
Yep.
I would say that has to do more with the fringes that happen to have a hold of the microphone.
Yeah.
I mean, you wind up having anti-freedom people on both sides of the spectrum getting the microphone and getting the public eye due to the fact that they're fringe, they're new, they're emotion grabbing, they get views, and getting views means getting people's eyes onto advertisements. Warren continues, disagreeing with people is different from thinking people should be jailed for their thoughts. Yeah.
Right. Agreed. I agree with that. But yeah, I think that would actually, let's see. Do you think we should move into the cat and the hat one?
Well, sure. Yeah, we are at about that point where it would make sense to do that.
Right. So let's look.
And this is a little ridiculous, but it has Dr. Seuss in it.
So of course it'll be ridiculous. That's the name of the game.
So I'll put that into the description next. And this is another piece on the Federalist. And it says, The Cat in the Hat. We're too PC to publish that. Reading a book as a parent aware of the times, I couldn't help but think that this classic children's book, which was published in '57, would never be released now. My 3-year-old recently noticed The Cat in the Hat on her bookshelf, a book my parents saved from my own 20th century childhood, which I don't think I've read since I was my daughter's age. It has appealing rhymes and a story my daughter liked. The cat is very mischievous. But reading the book as a parent aware of the times, I couldn't help but think that this classic children's book, which was published in 57, would never be released now. Sensibilities have simply changed too much. Yes, children still love hearing rhymes read aloud. However, the whole premise of the book is scandalous in 2018. To refresh your memory, a mother disappears for the day. To do what? While her young children sit inside bored and wishing it weren't raining. Concerns about sedentary children came in later. The Cat in the Hat then appears, seemingly out of nowhere. How did he get in? He's entertaining, but also seems to be a complete stranger. And the kids are amazingly copacetic about that. I wondered if this reflected parenting styles changing with the decades. However, my mother and mother-in-law, both children of the 50s, say they were never left home alone like this at young ages. So perhaps Dr. Seuss just set the scene as a more matter of silliness, a kid's version of what the mice do while the cat's away. But thinking of this as harmless fun, as it was likely intended, truly feels like visiting another era. I can't imagine a contemporary writer committing anything similar on paper. In the 21st century, there's no joking about leaving kids unattended for fear that someone will miss the joke and call CPS, Child Protective Services. Well, I'm sure CPS existed in the 50s. I don't have the sense it was used as a cudgel against political opponents and other parents the way it is today. Beyond that, there are simple issues of safety to consider, and so on and so forth. So basically, the author, that would be Melissa Langsam Bonstein, basically contends that The Cat in the Hat is too scandalous to be published today. I can get new copies of The Cat in the Hat, so people are still printing it. So that's one thing.
Right. Yeah. And it's really, it's just, it's quite interesting. To me, like, okay, so I read it when I was a kid as well, or it was read to me. I don't remember. And I don't remember at that point picking up, like, making the inferences that, like, oh, the cat somehow, like, I wasn't like, oh, did the cat break into the house? Like, no, I was focused on the rhymes and what the silliness that was happening. You'll notice the same thing in, say, like, movies. If you rewatch a lot of children's movies, you'll notice a lot of dirty jokes that go under the radar.
Yeah.
And they're fun. They're there for a reason, because obviously the people making the movie realize kids aren't going to pick up on this. So even if there is some potential, like, it's so far-fetched. This is a cat in a hat, it's this big walking cat in a hat. And
a bipedal cat.
Yes, a bipedal cat. Like, yes, exactly. Completely ridiculous. I'm just doubtful that a kid is going to be construing that as like, oh, okay, so strangers are fun. That's what that means. Like, and if the kid is able to recognize allegory and, like, abstract at that level, they're probably going to be smart enough to realize that, yes, you shouldn't trust strangers who might have bad intentions in head. So, it's the problem is people are sort of unable to get out of their own perspective, and it's, I guess it is quite hard to put yourself in the shoes of a kid. So what a parent sees as dangerous, and as, like, okay, I recognize that this situation is, unsafe or whatever. A kid is not, like, focusing on those things, and a kid is not making conclusions from the silliness. They're focusing on the rhymes, the funny. And what's funny was, they mentioned in the article, like, the goldfish was, like, the voice of reason, right? The one who's like, don't come in. And I'm pretty sure the goldfish didn't stand in as some voice of reason or some safety, like, oh, you should have listened to the goldfish. Look what the cat did. I think the goldfish is just there as kind of the Scrooge, right? And he's there to just kind of get, basically get toyed with by the cat. And it's lot, like, it's not more complicated than that. And yeah, and I think, again, the example about the dirty jokes in movies, like, it's the same thing. And I don't think kids are going to, like, it's just ridiculous. And if a stranger does come into the home, like, I think people are taking away from the fact that kids do have common sense, and if someone they don't know comes into their house without their parents around, kids are wary of strangers. If you ever even walked up to an extroverted kid, I've seen kids that when, for example, a week ago or so, we were invited over to my dad's colleague's house to eat, and man, they had this very just jubilant daughter, just so extroverted, man. She was just talking like a motor. Like she was just so. But when we first saw her coming in, even with the seeing her parents accept us and talk to us and stuff, she was shy. She was hiding behind doors and looking. Okay, who are these people? What's going on? And then of course she slowly grew up to this, and then became this kind of babble machine. Wanted to tour everyone around the house and show us everyone. But even this very extroverted girl had these sensibilities, and I think that those are kind of instinctual sensibility. When you're unsure of something, you don't embrace it instantly. You have to think about it a little bit, and yeah, I think they're kind of not giving kids any sort of they're not giving them the benefit of the doubt, really. I'm unsure. Like I don't know if it would be allowed to be published today. I don't know enough about the sorts of books that don't get published and the sorts of books that do to make some sweeping generalization. But
self-publish on Amazon.
Yeah, there you go.
And if they don't let you self-publish, well, then just go and find any one of the numerous things that'll print anything for you. Get a whole bunch of copies, buy some ads, and sell them yourself.
Yeah.
Self-publishing is a thing, and then you don't have all the overhead costs, so you need to sell way fewer copies in order to make the same kind of profit that you would. It'd be just a question of will people buy what you're selling, as opposed to will people approve what you're selling in order to get it through to the customers. Because people might actually have a vetting process that exists just because they know that their customer base wants to buy a certain kind of a product. And as far as I understand, things like the Cat in the Hat and Fox with Socks, or Hop on Pop and 10 Apples Up on Top, and things like Green Eggs and Ham, they're still being bought today, and they ain't cheap either.
Oh,
I mean, I think I spent like 12 or 13 bucks. Yeah.
Isn't Hop on Pop abuse? Isn't that like?
I don't think that it was that. My recollection, it was like this fat dad laying on his back and then having kids bouncing up and down, jumping on his stomach, using it as a trampoline.
Yeah.
And that was only like the
that was like one
stop. You must not hop on Pop, and it was only like 2 or 3 pages out of the entire book that just started introducing words like up and pup and cup and ball and wall and fall and things like that.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So yeah, and really not giving kids the benefit of the doubt, and then also assuming that kids are way more perceptive and aware of that sort of thing than they would be, and that they would make a generalization like, okay, you can let a stranger in. Like, I can't see people kids actually seem to have a decent amount of common sense, because kids are kind of in that scientist mode, right? They're still figuring things out, so they're figuring out cause and effect, and they're aware of that, and they pay attention to that. And they're not abstracting that far beyond that, so they do have a solid sense of logic and curiosity and stuff. It's later along the line when sort of sensibilities in some ways erode, I think, but that's a completely separate topic, so I'm not going to go too far into that. But yeah, I think it's silly. Again, and I'm so glad this article isn't, the Cat in the Hat's been disbanded or like cut from publishers and stuff like that. I'm glad it's not that.
And it's understood to be an opinion piece too.
Yep, it is. That is
so there's a whole lot of conjecturing. There's a whole lot of postulating, even though I don't think the words conjecture or postulate are in the actual article. That's what it's doing, and I think it's very important to keep that distinction in between news and opinion.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I agree. Trying to think of anything else that comes to mind when I think of that. I like the stance the author took. She wasn't too like she didn't make any like generals like she didn't like speak too strongly, right? She was just tentative and was sort of postulating, and it was obvious by her verbiage that she was like it was kind of postulating. And I'm very happy when people talk about opinion, like when they like opinion pieces are good. Like I think that's a fine thing, but I hate when they go under the guise of something that's not an opinion piece, like one we might mention later in the stream. When an opinion piece kind of acts like when someone acts as if their opinion is the fact, and they act as if they're above criticism and they're above outside logic. So
Yes, would you mind linking that to me in the WhatsApp as well?
yep.
Thanks. In the meantime, here's one continuing the topic of the Miss America thing we were talking about before. I'll put that in the video description here.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Since people are here now.
This is Miss America contestants react. What is it that the Miss America contestants actually think about the idea that they're not going to have the evening gown or the swimsuit thing anymore?
I have predictions, but you go.
Well, Good Morning America tweets, just in, we will no longer judge our candidates on their outward physical appearance. That's huge. And that means we will no longer have a swimsuit competition. At Gretchen Carlson on the major changes coming to at missamerica.org, gma.abc/2HLRCO. So on Tuesday, so 2 days ago, the Miss America organization announced it was axing the swimsuit and evening gown portions of its annual competition. In an interview with Good Morning America, Gretchen Carlson, chair of the board of trustees of the Miss America organization, said, "The event is no longer a pageant, but a competition, and that participants would no longer be judged based on their looks." In response, former and current Miss America participants sounded off. Some were disappointed in the changes, while others were happy about them. Here are 6 reactions from both sides of the debate. 1. Miss Cardinal, 2017. In a lengthy Instagram post, Lauren Scott, who was Miss Cardinal 2017, said the swimsuit part of the contest forced her to care for her body and love it. She also wrote that the way the Miss America organization announced the changes made it sound like women who aren't stick thin weren't welcome on the stage in years past. A notion Scott says is false. The change is just reassuring us that it was only ever meant for skinny girls, she wrote. Untrue. It's about rocking what your mama gave you in every shape and size. With a little special stars. What are you telling women when you agree with them that certain shapes just shouldn't feel confident on stage? Or that this is more fair to everyone, she continued. You're literally embracing skinny as the definition of beauty. Nope, nope, nope. Not okay with me. I hope this change doesn't cause anyone to question rocking their bikinis this summer. Bikinis are beautiful, your body is beautiful, and nothing should tell you otherwise. And then the flames. There's like these flame emojis there.
Interesting. I don't necessarily agree with her train of logic. Just because, like, I don't necessarily agree with the leap. Like, oh, you're saying that only skinny girls were accepted. Like, I don't necessarily agree with that. Like that jump. What my interpretation of that change was that essentially they're trying to appear more like basically less sexist and less like that sort of thing, and they're
So you
trying
don't
to
want to
appear
objectify the
yes,
woman's body.
exactly, not trying to objectify. That's what I thought they were doing.
Well,
Which is
yeah.
but which is antithetical to the concept of a pageant. Like a pageant is like
the pageant
it's a
is
beauty
objectifying something or another. Like beauty
yeah,
pageants is
it's
objectifying the dress and the body underneath the dress and
right,
all the cakey agents that one puts on the face of the person wearing the dress and so on.
right, exactly. It is in nature. So they're kind of dialing it back a bit, but it's like it's kind of it seems arbitrary to me. I don't see what is that going to really accomplish. I don't know. It seems arbitrary, and honestly, I'm gonna get a little needlessly philosophical maybe, but
Uh-huh.
even judging someone based on their personality and stuff like that, you would think that's kind of objectifying them too. It's like, well, you're ranking them by value, and that inherently is you're insinuating something there, right? So like the whole thing it's a contest, right? And it's not it's in the nature is it's not an objective contest. It's judges, right? So it is an objectifying ranking thing like that. Even if you had no look portion of it and it was just people speaking over a microphone and you didn't know who was who, that would still be the same thing. So it's literally, it just feels so arbitrary, and it does seem PC in the sense that there's that body posy thing as we've talked about,
Mm-hmm.
and the push towards, it's funny, like there's the push towards body positivity, but then there's, on the other hand, like, okay, let's take away the swimsuit contest because we shouldn't be judging people by their body, and
Yeah.
it's a convoluted, arbitrary mess, kind of.
Well, and also I'm not sure if I even know that this Miss Cardinal 27 Lauren Scott even um, necessarily agrees with what she said. I mean, I could just decide, okay, I'm going to take this at face value, but it seems almost like she's taking this as an opportunity to tout a position that she knows would be popular.
Oh
Now,
yeah.
so
Oh, you're right. That's a great point.
there is always the possibility that people are just thinking, well, who's my target demographic? Who am I going to get money from? Who am I going to get my Instagram upvotes from, etc. And what can I say to make these people happy?
Yeah,
Because here
it's
she is
very
saying,
true.
oh,
Great point.
well, I hope this change doesn't cause anyone to question rocking their bikinis this summer. I mean, she made this post on
No one
Instagram.
would do that. No one would. No, the Miss
No,
America pageant does not bring that much to view. Like, that's a non sequitur. Like, I will say that no one's gonna stop. People who were gonna wear their
well,
bikinis are going to. People who weren't. Like, this pageant is not
to
affecting
some
that.
extent, maybe, but then if you wind up bringing so much attention to it that people do become self-conscious, then that's another
Right.
thing.
That's true. Good point.
Like if people keep on getting their bikini bottoms in a knot over it, they might just decide to leave them at home. And I don't mean not putting anything else on over either. I mean, actually, so 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 saying all this body positivity stuff in an Instagram post is
Oh, that pushes her.
I mean, well, here let's actually I'm going to open the Instagram post. Lauren Lee Scott, and it's taking forever to open the thing. Okay. So there's a picture of her. Is it Krishna Goodwin Photography? So there's a picture of her in some sort of white bikini, and then has all sorts of people responding, "Amen, sister, preach, beautifully said." And then talking about beauty and sexual. Then there's like this gigantic wall of text by somebody that talks about beauty and sexual appealingness and doing fitness competitions and so on. So actually, there's quite a few healthy comments in this Instagram post too. I mean, then of course there's the people that are just doing it for the body positivity reasons too.
What is her Instagram again?
It's right here in the thing in the article that I linked in the description.
Okay. All right. Cool.
I can send it to you in
And
WhatsApp.
okay, no, I think I can get there. Let's see.
Okay, good. Then the next person is saying, this is Miss America 2014. Nina Davuluri, Miss America 2014 wrote, that she was excited about the changes. Today, the At Miss America organization moves into an era where we focus on inclusivity and empowerment by emphasizing what truly matters, substance within, she wrote in an Instagram post.
Okay, well.
And then, oh boy. So she has like a gigantic wall of text apparently. So they only took like a select quote from her.
What I think I'm gonna just say something maybe a little bit not super.
Who the Lauren Scott the Lauren Scott one?
The new girl you just said. I think
I
think her reaction was smarter for her own good in the fact that like the judges like are more likely to, and that's in my opinion.
Well, she's already been Miss America, so I don't think she can do it again.
Oh, okay, never mind.
Yeah. She was Miss America 4 years ago, which means that in terms of these sorts of contests, she's already too old to be it again because you gotta whatever.
Right.
But it says Miss America 2.0 is finally here, and then there's like raising hands. Since my time serving as Miss America and beyond, I've been fortunate to experience many proud moments in my career and recognition for my advocacy work. For a few. My swimsuit score had nothing to do with any of them. Today, the Miss America organization moves into an era where we focus on inclusivity and empowerment by emphasizing what truly matters. Okay, so how many buzzwords can we find here? Proud moments of my recognition. Advocacy work. Okay, so advocacy work is one.
Yeah.
But we'll use that as a phrase. Today, the organization moves into an era where we focus on inclusivity, 2, empowerment, 3, by emphasizing what truly matters, 4, substance within, 5. I couldn't be prouder to be a part of this evolution, 6. Ladies involved in #MAO, what is your proudest accomplishment? So there we are, engaging the audience. Comment below and share some substance inspo. #bye bye bikini, #circles of unity. Oh boy, I could come up with so many inappropriate jokes to say after reading that. Bye bye bikini.
Oh my god, circles of unity. Oh my god. I'm not even gonna say this.
I don't think either of us needs to. It's so ridiculous.
Oh my god. Oh my goodness. Yeah. And the thing is, if her point holds true, you would think that there would be very few very pretty girls in the pageant because I'll go from a general. So we're gonna assume that we're focusing on personality and substance and not on looks, right? So you'd think, and we're going to assume that very attractive girls are a minority because part of the reason it's self-contained within the definition of attractive is that they are like a deviant in some way, like they're above their standard deviations above the norm in attractiveness. So if you're looking at substance only, you would think that there would be maybe one attractive girl that got slipped in because the majority of people are average, right?
Yeah.
And
I guarantee you those average people would be caking on makeup like there was no tomorrow.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But if they're focusing on just substance and stuff, it's turning into something that's not what it originally was, and emphasizing what truly matters. Like, no, but you're only incrementally doing that. You're not subscribing to that. You're not subscribing to that belief completely. You're kind of incrementally doing it by taking out the bikini contest. Still, everyone in it who gets there is there because first and foremost, they're extremely attractive. Like that's what it's a pageant.
And interesting, that initial physical attractiveness isn't only what gets you in the door in many facets of life, but that makes life a whole lot easier for attractive women than collectively any other demographic.
Yes, right.
I mean, at the risk of sounding crass, people of both genders like, oh, boobies, and then give people a free pass.
Yeah. It is certainly, like, that's an undeniable thing. And one of my really good friends is she's like a model, and she talks about it all the time, how she takes advantage of it and uses it, and rightfully so. If you're given an advantage, take advantage of it. There's no need not to, but there's no need to pretend that this is not that has nothing to do with this.
No, we can be honest. We can be honest about what's going on.
Yeah.
But I think that a lot of people just don't like dealing with these certain elements that, with whatever system of virtues we happen to have, would say that, yeah, we actually might be a little bit less than virtuous. We're not all, Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or whatever the term is now, in terms of in terms of whatever the clean cut virtuous persona is supposed to be. It's like, yeah, we have this dark side to our nature too. And
yep.
At least I think a wise person would be, at minimum, cognizant of that. And like, going back to our original point, I'm pretty sure anybody who's willing to fight and die for a country is perfectly cognizant that he's not dying for a country full of angels.
Oh yeah.
But he loves the people there anyway.
Yep, exactly. And it is kind of that, okay, let's just deny this part of human nature because it's like, no, you should. If you want to deny that part of human nature and you really like it's really deleterious to you and you think that it's wrong, get rid of pageant like that.
Yeah, or just don't watch it. I mean, I haven't.
Don't watch it.
I haven't watched this. I mean, I'm trying to think. I might have seen like a recap on the news years and years and years ago of who won or something, but I've never watched the pageants, no. Miss America, Miss USA, Miss Universe, whatever all those other names are.
I think I've seen them.
Like, there's Miss USA, Miss Universe, Miss America. Yeah.
On YouTube, I've seen the funny answers that they'll give.
Oh, yeah, I saw there was one about education. That was pretty bad. Pretty bad.
Pretty bad. Yeah, I've seen the funny answers on like Instagram or YouTube or
I think that biggest problem in the... Oh, please, no.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
Yeah. Or they'll ask him questions that are like pretty difficult. It's pretty funny because they're... Yeah, anyway, I'm not going to go into it.
I'm just deer in the headlights. Look, I have no idea what's going on, but I'm just going to just let words come out of my mouth.
Equality, acceptance, no child left behind. That's accommodation. Yeah. I could just buzzword sort of thing. I don't know. That's usually what people revert to in those sorts of situations. But no.
I mean, like, why don't I go and become Miss America?
Yeah.
I mean, all I got to do is say why did they
why isn't there Mr. America? Come on.
No. I'll be Miss America. I'll be the first Miss America with a goatee, and I'll go there on the platform of better developmental appropriate education for everybody.
Yeah, there you go.
I'll just raise my voice an octave or two and act as feminine as I possibly can and be all fabulous. Or maybe I'll just be masculine because I need to like do me.
Right. Yeah, because it's your personality, right?
Yeah, it's my personality.
And let's not pretend that these girls are not like putting on that they're not putting on like basically like pretending that they're like if it's a personality contest, you're gonna try to accentuate and like fabricate parts of your personality that seem good. Like
of course. At minimum you're gonna emphasize the good and kind of hide the bad.
Exactly. And at maximum you're just gonna be someone who's not you and just
maximum is just an entire mask.
A mask, exactly.
Minimum you just cover up all the blemishes and leave the general structure intact.
Right, exactly. So yeah, let's not pretend it's something that it's not. But anyway, I think we should move to the inappropriately excluded. Maybe.
Well, we still do have about 6 more minutes left of this hour. But let me see if would you mind talking about that then for a while as I try to figure out this whole mess, because it seemed like the music that I had playing isn't actually playing.
Interesting. Let me check.
mess
Yeah,
because
I don't see. I don't. Yeah,
Well,
I don't hear the
that's
music.
unfortunate. I'm going to then do a couple little modifications here. But if you would already like to start bringing up what exactly is this inappropriately excluded thing?
All right, so let me pull up the article. That's where the place. So this will lead and this will lead quite well into our education hour. So the inappropriate. Okay, so the probability. I pulled up the article. Okay, so the probability of entering and remaining in an intellectually elite profession such as physician, judge, professor, scientist, corporate executive, etc., increases with IQ to about 133. It then falls by 1/3 to 140. By 150 IQ, the probability has fallen by 97%. In other words, a significant percentage of people with IQs over 140 are being systematically and most likely inappropriately excluded from the population that addresses the biggest problems of our time, or who are responsible for assuring the efficient operation of social, scientific, political, and economic institutions. This benefits neither the excluded group nor society in general. For society, it is a horrendous waste of a very valuable resource. For the high IQ person, it is a personal tragedy, commonly resulting in unrealized social, educational, and productive potential. The very limited research that has been done on this phenomenon has focused on possible flaws in high IQ people that might explain the exclusion. In order to be explanatory, the flaw would need to increase with IQ. However, the evidence that exists suggests that it is not the result of a compensatory flow, but rather the result of inappropriate educational and productive environments within the high IQ person must strive to succeed. Consequently, remediation should focus on creating more appropriate environments. So, interestingly enough, I want to point out. So obviously, probably, maybe not obviously, maybe not even completely, but probably psychologists and sociologists are the main people who are chewing on this sort of thing, if they get to it. And you know, there's this thing in psychology called you know, victim blaming, where because you can't really understand and recreate the situation that a certain person was in, you basically blame the person, right? So say someone accidentally runs a stop sign, and you're just gonna be pissed at them, right? Like, why would they get mad, road rage, something like that. You get the point. And maybe that person was having a horribly stressful day. Maybe they, had a family member who just had some horrible accident. There's, ad infinitum, there's so many explanations for why someone could make a mistake, right? But the person on the outside can't see that, right? So instantly, of course, the limited research has been done on the flaws of the high IQ people. So they instantly point to the victim, and which is silly because this is a broad thing, right? It's not a case thing. It's a trend seen across multiple individuals. So yeah, maybe they have something that comes with it that does something, but the likelihood is that the environment is what is precipitating this. And
very high
so let's
likelihood,
move on. Yeah, very high. So let's move on. The exclusion. In popular culture, IQ has become a point of contention. Many people credulously accept that the eminent have very high IQs and that people of ordinary accomplishments have ordinary IQs. For example, it was widely reported that Garry Kasparov had an IQ of 190. In truth, his IQ is verified to be 135. Others, often based on Stephen Jay Gould's book, The Mismeasure of Man, subscribe to the assertion that IQ is a useless oversimplification that primarily measures how well a person takes IQ tests. The science does not support either assertion. A very large body of scientific evidence shows that IQ tests measure a polygenetic trait, G, that exhibits moderate phenotypic variation. It is directly correlated over most of its range with positive light outcomes and inversely correlated with negative ones. It has also been shown to accurately measure what people mean when they use the words intelligent or smart. However, because of the moderate R values of its correlates, IQ is primarily a value in understanding the characteristics and interactions of large populations. Save as a diagnostic tool for very high IQ individuals, it is not sufficiently predictive to be reliably used on an individual case basis. It's really important.
Furthermore, it's incredibly important, and lots of people go and think that just slapping a number on one's forehead is enough.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, it helps give a ballpark. It certainly helps give a ballpark, but it doesn't.
Exactly. But it's not a prescription.
It's not the end all and the be all. You need to. there's
a whole
so
lot
many
of
other
factors.
extenuating factors. It's like, are you twice
Right.
exceptional? Were
Exactly.
you wasting time
How
on
was your environment?
Did you not care about the IQ test that you took?
Yeah.
I mean, that to some extent tests compliance as well.
Yeah. Exactly. And then that's that one guy on Quora. I don't remember his name. Selective.
Oh, the guy who had like a 2-digit IQ and is now studying to
Yeah.
get his PhD or got his
Yeah.
PhD or something.
Right. And he talks about how uncompliant it is. Yeah, the guy is definitely above average. He's definitely smart.
Yeah,
but he's
there's
just,
no way that if he weren't being that way that he would score
score
way
that
higher.
way.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's obvious. He talks about how he didn't comply and purposely threw the test. Like, but little known to him is he's actually going against his own point there. But whatever.
I mean, he knows, but I think that he's just trying to make the point about the score as opposed to about the actual IQ.
Right. Okay.
But
so
yeah, there's that graph. There's that graph attached to the article that basically says it has to do with that 133 point. That basically 133 is that point where in the intellectually elite professions that actually kind of have to deal with people and so on, 133 is that sweet spot where your IQ, where you get the maximum benefit from your IQ without having too much of the social stigmatization of having too high of IQ. And I'll put up this this little graph onto our stream overlay, which shows excluded high IQ people. So it goes to almost 0 at an IQ of slightly over 130 and goes to around a 141-ish. There's at the time of this article about 63,000 such people excluded from the professions that would have otherwise been going to them, which means that that's the place where the total number of people and the IQ gap mismanagement is the greatest. So technically, if we're talking about total amount of underservedness given two individuals,
yes.
the most underserved population is that
By quantity.
but by quantity is about 137 through 145.
Yeah.
Or thereabouts.
But proportionally.
But proportionately, if you're comparing to the total number of people, the higher you go up the IQ spectrum, the more difficult it is to be in a position that requires any kind of socialness whatsoever.
Yes.
Because if you go and you overlay this excluded high IQ people graph on top of the actual bell curve, you'll find that the excluded portion almost completely covers the bell curve. The top end, in that the people on the top end have to struggle an awful lot more just to accomplish the same things that someone with a 130 something would accomplish with relative ease. What were you saying?
Yeah, so I'd like to reply to Jacob Blank. So he says, I've seen conflicting evidence on this, and I think I know what evidence he's talking about. I have read the article you're discussing, but I have also seen studies claiming that IQ correlates with educational/career achievement all the way to the top. So I'm going to go ahead and assume that he is mentioning what Colleen Ferrelli puts on Quora a lot about this, the SET studies, the SMPY and the SVPY, so the studies of mathematically precocious youth, verbally precocious youth, and studies of exceptional talent. And so what I want to point out, I don't have any, I haven't done any actual scientific research on this, but I have,
you've done some reading.
I've done some reading. So when I look at these studies, I see, so they point out that, okay, so this is a talent search. So they're selecting kids who do really well on their, so there, I have a whole bunch of stuff, so I'm gonna have to unpack it, but as I go, but they select kids who do really well on SAT, stuff like that, as 12 to 13-year-olds generally. I think up to like 13 years old in 10 months. And so that you can get a correlate IQ from that. You can figure out okay, so most, the average IQ of the people taking these tests at this age is about 137, and then you can do the standard deviations from there and then go up the scale. So it's out of level testing. And
it's out of level testing that doesn't actually go all that high.
Yes. And in a perfect
situation. And as Jacob
situation,
Blank says, small, non-representative populations. Yeah.
Yeah. In a perfect setting, yes, that can accurately correlate to, like, but what we're assuming here is that there aren't, tiger moms who are pushing their kids, making them study a whole bunch as a kid, teaching them algebra and all that stuff way early, and these kids are already prepared for the tests, and they're going to take them at this age. And yeah, the kids who are doing this are definitely very smart. But
Ale's here. Hi, Ale.
Hey, Ale. But so we're assuming that these kids did not have any prep. I knew 2 kids who took the test. Okay, in my class, we had 2 kids. I was not allowed to take it because I screwed up the state exams. And Amina, some other friends did as well. But and they were selected from the gifted program. So I knew 2 kids. One kid, he was the son of 2 PhD students, and he was the lazy kid in school. He had C's, right? And he had like a C in pre-algebra, for example. He got a 33. I'm inclined to think that he wasn't studying too much. He didn't seem that motivated. But he was very smart. It was obvious he was very smart. He was all in non-sequitorial humor and all this stuff, and he was very eccentric and funny, and it was obvious that he was quite brilliant. So yeah, 33 I'd postulate that he's profoundly gifted. It would not be surprising, because in where I grew up, it was the 19th brainiest town in America per capita. There was plenty of smart kids, right? But this kid was just obviously out there. Then I had another friend, a close friend, who's about EG, who scored a 25, and he studied and stuff, and he prepped, and he got a 25. He didn't prep too much, I don't think, but he did prep. So you can't get a super accurate IQ correlate from that. And my impression is that, and here's another thing, an important thing to know is that these studies offer resources for these kids. And this, if you think about the termite, so Terman's study, right? He had one of the largest longitudinal studies on giftedness that there is. And he was criticized for meddling with their lives. But this is one guy with about 1,500 subjects, and he was criticized for there was criticisms that his study was unrepresentative, because he was like helping them with like job applications, and he was writing letters of recommendation, and he was counseling them and stuff like that. This is one man with a population of 1,500, mind you. So any intervention he's doing is probably not that significant. There's just so many people for him to keep tabs over. These studies are designed to facilitate education for these kids. They take them to college. There's scholarships. They're allowed to take college classes. There's counseling, gifted counseling. They're given a ton of resources, right? This is the very interventionist. It's, in my opinion, this is quite like, you're definitely like, to treat this as an objective study of how gifted people are in the wild is I cannot accept that, because there's just too much intervention going on. And the thing is, they're pulling from selected populations already of high SES. I'm pretty sure certain high schools don't even do the talent search in some rural areas. And so you're selectively picking these kids who are, some of them coddled, some of them are very gifted too. There's a mix. Of course, there's some very, very gifted people who show up in these studies, but the fact of the matter is, they're like, well, there's way more predicted than by the bell curve, and not necessarily by the bell curve, because we know that the tails are fat. That's pretty well mapped out, but even more than predicted by the fat tails. And in my opinion, that's simply because parental prep, like there is motivation for parents to prep
Tiger moms
for it, because yes, and these kids get special recognition for doing this, and they get scholarships. And there's been I can see why a parent would want to prep their kid for this. It's not some I wouldn't.
It's not like there's some sort of malevolence. It's that ultimately, at least along the path of success that the world kind of shoves you on, doing
Yes.
well at these particular milestones, reaching them at an early age, reaching them with high marks and so on, tends to set you up for whatever success the world is trying to tell you is actually success. Now, whether or not you decide that this is your success criteria, or any one given test is your success criterion, is a personal matter, but so many people oftentimes take that personal matter and just shove it aside and say, well, okay, we'll just play the game everyone else is playing.
Exactly.
Which might
Exactly.
not be the best thing if you're caring about the mental, physical, and emotional well-being
Of the
of
child.
a
Yeah.
highly, exceptionally, or profoundly gifted child.
Yes.
Hence, them
Exactly.
being underserved.
Right. Exactly. And so these longitudinal studies that, oh yeah, well, of course the the upper middle class to upper class kids who were selected and coddled and basically bred from a young age to do this sort of thing. Of course, it's not surprising they find career success. They probably have connections, money, all this stuff. They've been thrown into these situations. It makes sense that they have a higher rate of PhDs in the base, and it makes sense that they have a high achievement because they are smart. The kids are smart, no doubt. So once they get there, they would succeed. That much
But
does
but but
that's
but but they
not
already have
surprising.
the foundation that many other people
Right?
don't. The
Exactly, and that's the
the
thing.
privilege doesn't come because of anything like skin color. The privilege comes because of the social framework
That they're
surrounding
yeah,
their upbringing. Like a lot of them come
exactly.
from, most of them come from two-parent homes. Most of them come from, because the two-parent homes also correlate very much with parents having steady employment. That means that they have two sets of perhaps slightly overlapping social networks to tap into, a, a decent flow of money into the household to be able to pay for enough educational resources, or enough one-on-one time with parents, as opposed to single motherhood mostly. I mean, but you do have single fatherhood, but
Yeah.
more face-to-face time with parents. All these
Yes.
things around home life are considerably better. So if you go and you read the studies, and unfortunately I can't recall where they are right now, but there's basically studies that say that if you want to have success in the United States, there are two things you need to do. One, do not have children outside of wedlock. And two, get a high school diploma or a GED, period. You do both of those things, and you uh, get irreversibly hooked up with, i.e., married to, the right other person, which means, of course, you're sharing expenses, you're sharing responsibilities. There's some elements of division of labor, and since you've gotten that high school diploma minimum, there are going to be certain employment opportunities available to you, especially if you continue your own education. The kiddo's going to be in a much better place than if there's just one parent.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
so is the entire family financial situation.
And my main qualm with the study, I think it's a great thing they're doing. I think it's great that they're getting these kids out of level tested. I think it's great that they have these counseling opportunities, the college opportunities. That's all great. There's nothing. I don't
Oh
see
yeah,
anything wrong with them.
that is
But
inherently good.
but to treat that as representative of the gifted population as a whole is, I think, a huge misstep. I think that's just that's logical. That's a non sequitur, in my opinion, and I think it does a big disservice to the people who are on that gifted spectrum, who aren't in these sort of situations or did not have these opportunities, and then basically they're treated as if they don't exist, and that's like, I mean, that's just wrong.
Well,
So
yeah.
in my opinion.
Um, you familiar with Dr. Ben Carson?
I am familiar with who he is, and he was like a neurosurgeon and stuff, but I don't know much about him.
Okay, he's done some good things, but I would say probably the single best thing that he has done. I mean, of course, cutting people's heads open, performing hemispherectomy, so that people, daring to do them, being the first person to dare to do them and actually succeed, kind of a thing. It's good,
Yeah.
but even better, or even more widely lasting is using your financial acumen to become wealthy and using your wealth to give out scholarships, to build reading rooms, which are essentially libraries that are fun for kids to be in, that are near or easily accessible to them, where the entire point is to foster a love for reading. Apparently his mother couldn't read and still pretended to be able to read and made him and his brother write book reports.
That's
And
awesome.
she'd just go and she'd take a red pen and she'd underline things and, say, do better here and do better there and think a little more about that. And they had no clue.
So they would just improve, right?
So they would just improve. They would be like, okay, well, she must have thought I could improve something here. What can I
Right,
improve?
and they would rationalize. They would find their own mistakes then, right? That
And they
gears
would
them
find
into
their own mistakes, and they would write their mom book reports. Their mom made them listen to classical music. Their mom took an extra job cleaning houses for well-off people and spent the majority of her time thinking about what it was that was going on in their households that allowed for the perpetuation of the success of their children, and then did as much as she possibly could in her own household to emulate it.
Yeah.
And so Ben Carson wants to be able to give opportunities to people that otherwise wouldn't get them, and he has concluded that the best thing you can do is scholarships and reading rooms. And I would say, in addition, the scholarship kind of opens doors. The scholarship deals with the financial aspect. The other thing I would say is sharing of social network. So if there are contexts that would benefit from meeting each other, introducing them.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the solution is so incredibly simple, but it's not
Mhm.
one that people want to embrace because it doesn't quite fit with the idea of how things are supposed to go. Because I know pretty much every single person in school that doesn't already have a healthy background of having learned to love reading at a young age,
Oh yeah.
and learn to take in information that way, and to think critically, and to have conversations over the dinner table about things, and to be able to articulately discuss these things.
Yeah.
Is the people that don't have that are at a
Huge
huge
disadvantage.
disadvantage.
And do you think, even if they are super gifted, do you think, given an out-of-level test, if someone is just completely unaware and they're competing against kids who have studied and who've prepped, do you think these kids are gonna they might not fare that well? And that doesn't preclude someone from being gifted,
No, it doesn't.
because
But
some people are
because
just
so
so
much of this can
disadvantaged.
be prepared, I mean,
Yeah.
the tests themselves aren't perfect. The
No.
tests are
Exactly.
perfect if everyone goes into them with no preparation. Then it winds up demonstrating natural talent, natural ability,
Right.
and so on. But home environment, emotional stability, ability to take in information uh, in a variety of different media, all
Right.
those things.
Neurological makeup, if they're twice exceptional, like
Oh yeah,
it. For
and
example,
learning to deal with that as well.
right. For example, I had access to, I have ADHD and I had access to medicine. Without it, my score, I would not do so well on these tests. I would not. But, and so, that's just this the way my brain works. I wouldn't be able to finish in time. I'd be too slow in letting the information settle. And think of the disadvantaged kid, twice exceptional kid. He doesn't have, or a kid who has their parents believe in all purely homeopathic things, and they don't, medicine is evil and stuff like that.
Don't give your children a vaccines; it'll cause autism.
Yeah, those people. Imagine the smart kids who, kind of ironically have those people's parents. Uh, they get kind of screwed, and they don't get recognized, and the gift that they might have does not get facilitated or expressed. Like environment does have a big role in gene expression. Their gift might. Someone on Quora told me they had a great analogy for this, and I'll steal it. Thomas West is his name, brilliant guy. And he said, gifted people are, very gifted people. They're born with, a Ferrari brain, right? Let's say they have a Ferrari, and the thing about Ferraris though is they require a lot of maintenance. They require lots of maintenance. They're prone to break down. They're expensive. They need to be coddled. Yes, they're very fast, but they need good conditions to display this. And some parents just give their kids the car, right? Oh, here's a Ferrari. See ya. And then the kid's like, okay, let me learn how to drive in this Ferrari. So they're just crashing it everywhere. And then eventually that Ferrari looks and acts like a normal car. It looks ugly and beat up. Not that normal cars are, but it does compared to what it used to be.
And it's even more difficult because it costs $1,000 to change the oil.
Exactly. And then it's hard for them to recover. And now it drives like a normal car. The gift is not expressed. While maybe the average person is born with like an average car. Maybe like, let's say a little bit above average person is born with like a reliable Toyota, right? So they get through and things work out, and you don't need too much. Like you can learn on a Toyota. Like these kids need extra resources, and if they're not getting it, they're going to fall through, and they might not even be recognized by these measures of giftedness that the schools are using. So I see a whole host of problems with those studies, and I don't like when they're perpetuated as it's like the fact and representative, and when it's just so these are pretty obvious things. I mean, even in gifted schools, right? On Quora, I saw someone talking about, their daughter is, maxed out an IQ test or something. Very, exceptionally to profoundly gifted daughter, likely. And, she's complaining about school, right? She's complaining about how easy math is and stuff like that. And there's a gifted school in the city, but what the dad expressed was, he said, okay, well, I know there's a ton of parents prepping their kids and, basically making them study for the entrance exams for these gifted schools and just dick measuring and all this awful shit. And he didn't want to send his kid to this.
Do it.
Right. And so, yeah.
Sending your kid to that environment is toxic.
Yes, exactly.
I mean,
so he doesn't want
just a bad idea.
And it's the school designed for these people is not good. Like it's not inherently this method is not that good for their emotional health. I'll say that. Maybe they'll have an advantage with the course material covered and the pacing and stuff like that. But emotional health wise, which matters, I think that takes precedent to your academic success. That is getting kind of trampled on a bit, or you're losing some.
Academic success will come
with yes.
Get the emotional environment right, and you can get average students performing well above average standards.
Yeah, exactly.
And it has to do ultimately, and I'm going to be very very visceral with my imagery here, but I think that there's actually a place for it. It has to do with treating children like human beings instead of as chattel of the state. And yeah, that is a very extreme wording, saying, oh, chattel of the state. Well, you put children into a building that's structured similarly to a prison, that has bells that ring at predetermined intervals to force people to go from A to B to C.
Oh, God, yes.
And interestingly, the environment of, the way the aperiodic reinforcement schedule goes based on people's behavior does it both homogenizes the person and kind of leaves them wanting in some aspect for meaningful interaction. So they'll latch on to any little scraps you throw them, as opposed to giving them an emotionally rich place where they can feel safe and thrive. Like the only people that actually do thrive in the school environment are the people that have emotional stability from outside and who are intrinsically very compliant. You need to have both of
Yes.
those in order to naturally excel. Now, certainly you can have people that just check out at the first check out at the word go. And then every time that there's a test, just kind of, go figure things out because they're smart enough. But those people are insanely rare. Most of the people that actually are very, very, or relatively very clever, relatively very capable, are completely underserved by the system that exists. And it has more to do with uh, the actual system, the actual environment, than anything else.
Yeah, exactly. Precisely. And
So, what are your suggestions for improving the learning environment for, let's say, a below average student, an average student, an above average student, and let's just say a student somewhere in the gifted spectrum?
okay, yeah, I'll I think I can answer all of them almost at once. So I think from the get-go, there should be ability slash mastery separated grade levels.
Mm-hmm.
People with developmental disabilities who, like, so I'm going to start with the lower end of the spectrum. People with developmental disabilities who you've got the curriculum has got to be basically designed for what is useful for them, what will be useful for them. I think it should be more designed around practical skills, stuff like that. I don't think, say you have someone who is, mentally retarded or 70 IQ or below. Let's say that. I don't think jamming trig into their brain is of the utmost important. I think teaching them practical skills, and depending on your environment, certain things are practical, certain things are not. I'm not going to go into that. I'm going to stay a little bit more broad.
Okay.
To me, I think that's more important because these people can hold a job and they can generate income and they can relatively subsist and stuff like that. So I think teaching them things like, how to tell time, how to schedule, maybe how simple money management things, that sort of thing can go a long way. And I think you should, like, it doesn't, philosophy, like, no, like, it doesn't matter. That's not going to help them. The average person, I think, so that's a population that is sort of underserved by the educational system, that they need specific accommodations and they need specific curriculum geared towards them, which I think to an extent they do, but I think it's half-hearted, and yeah, so I'm not going to go too much more into that. So the average
Mm-hmm.
student should be, basically they should have a mastery focused approach. So and a grade level should be separated by who can do what, not by how old everyone is. Keeping everyone in lockstep with each other is awful, because what that does is, for the kids on the bottom, makes them feel like shit. They're always behind. They're always getting bad grades. They don't have enough time to synthesize the information. It hurts their self-esteem. It makes them hate school, and it shuts them off to learning that they could have been doing. And then they get this preconceived. It basically cultivates a fixed mindset, right? Not a growth mindset, but things are set in stone. People on the other end of the spectrum get lazy. They get complacent because everything's easy, and they don't develop habits that everyone needs in life. Because regardless if you can not do shit and get A's on your tests, the real world doesn't work like that. Your job doesn't work where, like, everyone else is working. And I mean, in specific intellectual professions, you would have to be an extreme outlier to be this person. So they do exist, but it's such a minority that I don't even have to really cover that right now. But these people in the real world, you need to be able to work. You need to be able to complete your tasks. How quickly you do it. My dad has a great saying that he takes from Lance Armstrong, and it's, you don't go, he said, things never get easier, you just go faster. And the problem is, so when these top Tour de France, riders and stuff, it's hard as hell for them. Maybe if you're out of shape, go try to ride a bike for 10 miles on hills or something. I don't know. Just go. It's going to be really hard, right? You might throw up. It might be burning muscles. And then you'll see those people flying by for hundreds of miles and they're going up mountains and stuff. Well, guess what? It's almost just as hard for them, but they're just going faster. And that's the sort of thing that you want for these gifted kids is you don't want them to just sitting there. So you don't want the person who can be going 100 miles up the mountains and stuff to be on this 10-mile course with the slopes. And because, then they're just going to learn how to coast, and they're going to learn how to just, I'll just put out a little effort here, and now I can coast. And that's not good, because that's not how the real world works. You don't just coast and then do something. No, you continuously output. And the whole premise behind reaching your ceiling or working to your potential is not on coasting. It's on working as hard as you can and getting the best results for yourself.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that you have to that you have to push and create an emotionally unstable environment where there's this disproportionate risk reward paradigm forced on the kid, but you just let the kid be exposed to life and pursue a set of goals.
Exactly. And the first principles approach is you need that emotional environment. You need to set that up, and then these results. That reminds me, Matt, if you don't mind me saying, when you talk about weight loss, when you talked about how you, instead of trying to just lose weight out whole, you're like, all right, I'm going to try to set a certain set of physiological markers. I'm going to try to get these certain levels to here. And then once you did that, weight loss was a byproduct of it. That's the sort of thing we're talking about, is by setting up an emotional environment and a stimulating academic environment for these kids, success is a byproduct of it. They don't need to be pushed. It doesn't need to be the biggest loser out here. You just set up the environment for them to flourish, and the flourishing happens. And so ability-based separation is good for everyone, I think, because people, if you're separated based on what you can do and what your mastery is, or what you're used to, maybe of course there will be some residual comparisons, right? Because they'll be like,
why are you 3 years younger than everybody else and in this class? And
exactly.
Why is he 3 years older than everybody else and in that class, and etc.
Exactly. And that will happen. But if the ideological focus is obviously on learning and mastering things, and less on and less on comparing yourself to other students, that's a mindset that teachers can don.
And if that environment of respect is perpetuated in the classroom.
Yes, exactly. I mean, if they don't look down on the student.
You just put your foot down and say, we're not tolerating disrespect in here, buddy. Shape up.
Exactly. And you treat everyone with respect and dignity, and you just facilitate their learning as best you can. This ability-based separation will work wonders, in my opinion. I mean, and yeah, so for the super gifted people, you should, just continuously be feeding them and gauging what their interests are, showing them, getting them deeper into their interest, cultivating new interests from that, giving them a variable material and just letting them go at their pace. Everyone should be doing this instead of just, okay, we want, it needs to be, okay, this is another kind of a connection to what we talked about earlier. So when we were talking about IQ, we were talking about how it's great for population-based things, right? So as an average, it works quite well, right? If you're talking about people as a whole, it's pretty predictive in that sense. But when you get to the individual, it kind of falls apart. And then not for certain individuals it won't, but some people it doesn't work. It just doesn't work for them. And what I think they're doing with education is they're treating it as a broad population-based thing, and they're okay, let's have this percent of kids doing this well and this, etc. And so, yeah, if you're maximizing the population as a whole, maybe it looks all right for them. But if you're treating people as individuals, you're going to see, first of all, you're going to see the population as a whole excel. That will be a byproduct. But also, by treating people as individuals and accommodating to their specific academic needs rather than keeping them in lockstep, you will be promoting an environment that helps them build habits that will basically sustain their future, instead of making either the kid hate school and hate themselves and feel insecure and inferior, or making the kid think they're on top of the world and become lazy and complacent and then hit a wall at one point and then just fall to the wall and splat like a bug and no longer proceed because they've never hit trouble. And I've had teachers like, oh, the problem with genius is they're lazy. And it's like, well, no,
they're not
the system,
challenged.
they're not challenged. The system, yeah. What
They're not given a healthy set of challenges.
and there's always the wrong push. And my dad did this. So it's like, oh, well, just do it anyway, just power through it, just do the work anyway, like, or do extra anyway. Like, but the thing is, an environment, kids have an internal sense of logic, and people as a whole have some internal sense of logic, varying levels of that. And if people are going to do as much work as they need to, and if they see the system and they see the other kids not working really hard and they get the same results without working, why would they be pushed to do more? They see the standard because they're comparing themselves to a population at that point. They're comparing their what they can do to basically the other people. And and that's negative. And that's negative for everyone. You should be comparing what you can do to what you could do, basically, what you are doing to what you could do, and what you should be doing, not to other people, because everyone's different. You're comparing apples to oranges at that point, and it's just not. It's negative. And the whole system is sort of built around this, like, okay, we want everyone at this standard, and then the kids above the standard are rewarded for, oh, you look how good you are compared to these other people. And then the other kids are just kind of like feel bad about themselves and have a negative outlook on education. And it's just like, it's a whole cesspool of shit. So I've gone on a long rant and I've basically said what I want to say about that. But yeah, treat people as individuals. I'll summarize: treat people as individuals. Develop an environment specific to the kid in need, or the kid in question, regardless of their ability level, and compare them to themselves and their own metric, and not to other people. And yeah, that's what I have to say on the matter. And if you think about like educational systems in the past, like apprenticeships, there was not like some. Obviously, there was, it was an the master to the apprentice. There wasn't. They weren't. It was a relationship where they were just, okay, let me pass on my knowledge to you and you learn. And so it's just focus on this person learning, and that works quite well. And obviously, when you have a group of people, that sort of thing can sort of get muddled with, or meddled with in a way, but it doesn't have to be. I don't think it has to be. So yeah,
All right.
that's sort of what I.
Well, on that note, let's take a 5-minute intermission and then reconvene to talk a bit about opportunity cost and open up nearly our third hour to talk a bit about economics.
All right, cool. Sounds good to me.
All right. So first, I'll cut our noise out. Then I'll switch to a new screen and see you in 5. And we are live again for
Hello.
the last hour and 17 minutes of our stream. So far, we've discussed a few articles, the Inappropriately Excluded, and a bit about education and how we would structure education in an ideal school setting, assuming that school is even the goal in the first place. And I was thinking that here in the last hour we could talk a bit about economics. And I know economics is a soft science, but at the same time, the whole idea of economia is a study that's taken place for thousands of years, back to the ancient Greek times in the Western world, and even especially in the Babylonian times, economics was a really big deal. In the Greek civilization, the whole point of economia was stewardship of what you have. And what does that boil down to but making good choices? And so it leads to the very first, or at least what I understand to be, I'm not going into any complicated calculations, but I think that we should discuss first principles so at least we get an idea of what the basis of the later calculations that we do are.
Yeah.
And that involves discussing, I think the first principle of economics is opportunity cost. How do you decide to do one thing instead of doing another? And here's a few questions. I'll put them up on the screen. It has to do with identifying elements of scarcity, choice, and opportunity cost in each of the following situations. Situation 1. The Environmental Protection Agency is considering an order that a 500-acre area on the outskirts of a large city be preserved in its natural state because the area is home to a rodent that is considered an endangered species. Developers had planned to build a housing development on the land. So what are the elements of scarcity, choice, and opportunity cost?
All right. So I would say the scarcity would be the endangered species. There's not much of them, or not many of them.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the elements of choice
Well,
would be
let's unpackage scarcity a little bit more.
okay. Yeah, good idea. I sort of just answered one. Yeah. So
So there's only 500 acres.
yes.
That land, we live on the earth, and I'm just going to put the Captain Obvious hat on here for this conversation. We live on the
Okay.
earth, and the surface area of the earth is relatively constant. That land isn't going anywhere.
Right.
That land will be that land, that very plot of land, perhaps moved due to tectonic movements, but in 1,000 years that land should still be there.
Yeah.
And it'll probably look different, but that land is a scarce resource. There's not going to appear 1,000 feet up in the air another piece of land. So
Right.
so that land is all you got when it comes to that land. Pardon me
Yes.
for being Captain Obvious there, but that is an element of scarcity too. And then
Uh-huh.
and then in that land there is everything, not only the rodent that's an endangered species, but everything in that particular piece of land. And then the scarcity relates to how available or unavailable it is. So
Yeah.
the rodents clearly are the most scarce thing that we recognize, but who knows? There might be some species of fungus that nobody knows about that's even more scarce. Or
Right.
there might be some oil underneath the land that's really, really valuable. There could be so much more that we don't know about that piece of
Right.
land, but
But by choosing to build houses there, we would be essentially making kind of a trade-off in that, right? If I'm fair to say that.
yeah. So there we just said, okay, choice and opportunity cost. The opportunity cost is the trade-off. The opportunity cost of building the houses is losing the rodents and losing the land to the land isn't going to look pretty or natural or whatever it might be. the land is going to continue to. If you want the land to look that way, then you're sacrificing the development project. And if you want the development project, you're sacrificing the land. You can't have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah. Right. So, what were the three? There's choice, scarcity,
choice, and opportunity cost.
And so so opportunity cost is basically weighing the scarcity and the choice, like kind of.
Exactly. So now that I've gone and completely hijacked question number 1, I'll go and pose to you question number 2. There's 3 of these. Question number 2 is, the manager of an automobile assembly plant is considering whether to produce cars or SUVs next month. Assume that the quantities of labor and other materials required would be the same for either type of production.
Okay, so and that's it.
That's it. Cars or SUVs, and labor and other materials would be the exact same no matter which one you do.
Okay, so
scarcity, choice, and opportunity cost.
All right, so by choosing, I'm assuming it's binary, right? So you can either make one or the other.
Yeah, you're either making cars or SUVs, one or the other.
All right, so obviously by choosing to make SUVs, you are basically precluding yourself from making cars. So if you're in an environment where SUVs aren't as, let's say you're in a relatively temperate climate and you live in a very urban area. You're in that situation. If you make SUVs, you are basically preventing yourself from, you might be losing out on capital circumstance net wise because there's more demand.
Slow down. What is the scarce resource here?
The one that you're not making?
No, that's the opportunity cost. The scarce resource is...
the scarce resources is your the ability to direct your is the scarce resource basically the labor capital that you have, like the labor?
Yeah, all the machines, the plant,
the
workers.
Okay.
All the machines in the plant and the workers are capable of only doing one of those things.
Okay. Right.
So that's just like the land in and of itself and everything that it contains is the scarce.
Right. Okay.
In the previous one, the facilities and everything contained therein is the scarce resource.
Okay, that makes sense.
So, and the choice is between cars and SUVs. So the opportunity cost of producing cars would be what?
Well, SUVs. You lose out on SUVs.
Yeah.
And if you make SUVs, you lose out on cars.
Exactly.
And because scarcity is what forces you into making the decision.
Yeah. And ultimately, then what would make a business owner decide to produce cars or SUVs?
Basically, I would say the environment. Basically, which one has I'd say a lower opportunity cost.
Yeah. Yes. In that.
So
so the lower opportunity cost. How would you measure it?
Yeah, so I would say, for example, I would measure it in that circumstance by money made.
Exactly.
Money potentially made.
So the profit that you could have made off of cars, if that's less than the profit you could have made off of SUVs, then you make SUVs, and the opportunity cost is the profit you could have gotten from the cars. But because the opportunity that you took was less than, or gave you more than the other opportunity, you made the right choice.
Yeah.
Or the opposite, depending on the circumstance.
And that's what when I was going too far ahead, and I was saying, like, yeah, if you live in an urban environment where the terrain isn't too bad, you'd probably want cars over SUVs, because why would that? SUVs kind of indicates rough terrain, and or a
bunch of people that want to go camping, or
yeah, exactly, yeah.
But then why not get a Jeep, right? No.
I want to roll over.
I want one of them Jeeps. I want to go four
I
wheel.
heard they got a good center of balance.
Oh yeah, darn tootin', they got a good center of balance. All right.
Yeah, I heard they corner real well. Anyway.
Yeah, they do. You corner and then they roll over, and you have to go push the thing back up. But that's another story entirely.
That's a physics lesson there.
Yes, sirree. All right. So, case number 3. A young man who went to work as a nurse's aide after graduating from high school leaves his job to go to college, where he will obtain training as a registered nurse. So, what is the scarce resource here?
Is time.
Okay, time.
And the opportunity cost is basically what does what does going to college, what does that net you, what maybe employment opportunities, so money again, what monetary opportunities that bring you, what does that bring you, what opportunities do you lose what by going to college, or like what in that time could you have accomplished monetarily.
All right, so
And
he is a nurse's aide right now, and wants
mhm.
to go and get
Right.
training to become an
Okay,
RN, a
okay,
registered
okay,
nurse.
yeah. So the what he loses out is the salary of the nurse's aide in that time frame.
Okay, so that's the opportunity cost of going to college. Now, the opportunity
Yep,
cost of remaining a nurse's aide is
is losing out on the potential future revenue of being an RN.
okay. So ultimately, the big thing about all these different changes is, or all these different choices, is you have to think of what is more valuable to you. In the
Yeah,
case of business, it's profit. In the case of your personal life, you might not care so much once you get a certain amount of money, and so you could structure your decisions based on some other principles. But whatever those governing principles are what you use to make your decisions. Once again, Captain Obvious, put the big O on my forehead here. But making decisions is ultimately what economics seeks to study.
yeah,
How do people make decisions? What constitutes these decisions? What principles should people use in making these decisions? Who should make the decisions? Like
yeah,
and ultimately that means that politics becomes a question of economics. Now, who
yeah,
should be making my decisions for me? Should I be deciding what I can do with something, or do I think that the government should decide this, or should we decide it at a federal, local, or state level? Is anarchy an appropriate answer? All these different questions ultimately result in different opportunity costs. And have you heard of the idea of utils?
I have heard the word, but I don't know what it means. I'm
Okay.
I'm pretty much vastly. I don't know any economics really. But I have
I
like
don't even know if utils are necessarily an economic,
okay,
like what they teach in a curriculum, but they're an idea that somebody came up with.
okay, yeah.
And
Just tell me.
it basically is in our own minds. We kind of keep an idea, a record of what things are of equivalent value. So, like, if you have, um, if you're down to your last dollar, are you going to have the same relationship to that dollar as if that, as if, or compared to if you had uh, a net worth of $100 million, and that dollar is not your last dollar?
No, in the same way that it's kind of that reminds me of how time seems to pass faster when you're older because less of percentage. Yeah, but whatever.
Yeah. So ultimately, that dollar, the hundred and the 100 million and first dollar, would have less of a value in terms of utils than the first.
Right.
And
It's like diminishing returns.
sort of. Um,
Okay.
I mean,
And
or somebody could be like, well, I'm down to my last dollar. Screw it, I'll buy a lottery ticket, and then the value would actually be less. But then somebody who's prudent and had a couple thousand in the bank or whatever, and you know a working class or lower middle class job, they might value a dollar most of all.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
you don't know. It's an
That's
individual to
true. It is. It's
individual
very
thing.
personal.
So how many utils, an arbitrary unit, do I derive from any given dollar? Oh, am I going to spend my last dollar to buy a lottery ticket in the hopes that I win? Am I going to invest it? Am I going to spend it on food? Am I going to spend it on what do I want to use it for? So the
Hmm.
utils are directly related to myself and my priorities and the situation that I'm in.
And you want to? Is this fair to say? So utils, if we're just talking, so it's talking about things that are equivalent. You want to basically net as many utils as you get. Like you want to you want to trade a one util dollar for two utils of something
Yeah,
for you.
exactly. And that is why the free market can generate value from nothing. Because if I have a dollar that's burning a hole in my pocket, that's not doing me any good, and you have a bottle of soda that you don't want to drink because it's one out of a pack of 12, and I decide to give you the dollar and you give me the bottle of Coke Zero,
Yeah.
wealth was just generated because I
Generated.
got what
Yeah.
I wanted. I got the pop, which was worth to me more than the dollar I gave for it, and you got the dollar, which was worth more to you than the pop which you gave for it.
Right. Awesome. Yeah.
So literally, we that transaction just created wealth out of nothing because wealth is actually
And it also explains
what you
specialization.
want. Yes, it does. Perfectly explain specialization.
That's awesome. Yeah, I like that.
All right, so that's that was like what 15 minutes of an econ lesson, and in the last like 2 minutes, we covered more than most people get in a week of school.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. For sure. Definitely. And it's because you started from first principles. I mean, I said rodents at first. That was the scarce resource. I was like, but by starting from first principles and then slowly correcting my approach, it started to
Mhm.
it evolved much quicker than
Yeah,
yeah.
500 acres and everything on it.
Yeah, exactly. That is the scarce resource. Yeah.
Hmm. So if we find the scarce resource and what the opportunity cost is, and then figure out what we want, that provides the foundation for making economic decisions or making decisions in general. I mean,
Hmm.
even if we're not thinking, then that tells us that at least emotionally we value something more than something else.
Right. Right.
Like somebody that
Exactly.
that gambles away their fortune. Well, they think that they're getting more utils by taking their dollar to the casino or by buying lottery tickets or what have you
And
than by investing.
in that sense, value is kind of unitless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Great. Awesome.
Ah, Mr. David Sanderson says, hello, capitalism and communism both have flaws, but it's no question which system is more efficient. And I would say, yeah, both systems have flaws in as much as. Oh, Philip Christensen is here too. Hello, Philip.
Yep.
Um, Capitalism and communism both have flaws, but it's no question which system is more efficient. Yeah, and it winds up being a question of systems. I would say that both of them have flaws due to the fact that human beings have flaws. And communism expects people to behave virtuously. So communism, it like turns a blind eye to the flaws of human beings. They're like, well, if only we gave them the perfect set of circumstances, everybody would work for nothing and take only what they need. I mean, why else?
Yeah.
Why else did Soviet? Uh, why did the Soviet? Why else was the Soviet Union uh, economy predicated upon mass murder? It's because bullets are the only way to get people to work if you don't have a carrot. You have to beat the donkey with a stick if you don't have the carrot in front of it. Otherwise, the donkey ain't gonna move. Similarly to if you're going to work and have it all taken away from you, there's no incentive to do anything. So it's either bullets or carrots. So capitalism fully says, yeah, I know we're all selfish, greedy bastards. So what can we do in order to turn this thing that many people view as a vice into something that works? It's like, how can I be greedy? And how can you be greedy and still both of us somehow wind up getting what we want? Well, we're forced into doing what's best for the other person and trading things that we value less for things we value more. And if everybody does that, then virtuous or vicious, the system more or less works. Ah, yes, to expect everyone to cooperate in the government not to get corrupt is beyond naive. Yes.
Yeah.
Amen. A freaking men. That's that's how it works.
Ooh, that is quite true.
Oh yeah, and
Good.
just for the sake of all of you following along, I've put in links for the things that we've discussed so far. A few articles from the Federalist, the Polymath Archives one with the Inappropriately Excluded, and my personal favorite out of all of these, the Open Courseware MIT series of lectures on microeconomics from fall 2011. There's also a free textbook available, video lectures, all the assignment solutions, exams, and solutions from that particular course. So if
Awesome.
any of you want to follow along uh, during our economics hour, and work ahead and go through the principles of microeconomics, you're more than welcome to do so. In fact, I highly encourage you to, even though it is a social science instead of a hard science. I think it gives, if you keep first principles in mind, it'll give you a
Mhm.
wonderful framework for looking at the world and making good decisions that will benefit you, which is obviously what you should care about, benefiting you, and still fitting into the scheme of other people so that, they can benefit from you. Not that you even need to care about it. Though I do think it's a plus if I can benefit from you. I certainly hope that if you think it's a plus if you can benefit from me. Ah, Jacob Blank says, the problem with capitalism is that which is selected by the invisible hand may well be objectively bad due to humanity's innate flaws. Don't you have to subscribe to some kind of subjectivism to think that it necessarily leads to a positive outcome? There's no objective good or bad. Good is what people decide it to be. Well, I'm
That's an
not a, I'm
interesting
I'm
question.
not an objectivist. First off, so neither do I, Mr. Sanderson. I don't agree with moral relativism either. Uh, I'm not an objectivist, but ultimately, um, oh boy, now we're going deep. We're going to the philosophical underpinnings of all this.
That's
So
good though.
so I guess we'll start by saying, okay, the problem with capitalism is that which is selected by the invisible hand may very well be objectively bad due to humanity's innate flaws. Well, there are certain principles then that we must adhere to. In fact, that is where the general idea of human rights comes in. It's like, what rights do we have that are inalienable? What rights do we have that we say, okay, you can do so much, but you cannot take these rights away from me? And, the founding fathers of the United States settled upon life, liberty, and well, if we're thinking in terms of what John Locke said, property, but then also that was taken one level of abstraction away from that to pursuit of happiness, which I actually think was in the wrong way, because property is even more general if you understand property in an abstract sense. So if I can't, for example, the libertarian non-aggression principle, if I cannot aggressively deprive you of your stuff, I cannot aggressively deprive you of your life, of your freedom, or of your stuff, then whatever you decide to do, however destructive it may be, if you can finagle a way of doing it without impinging upon me not wanting to do it, or him not wanting to do it, or her not wanting to do it, but if you, and you want to do it, then get together and do it. Capitalism allows people, well, not capitalism per se, but a free market allows people to make bad choices. If you want to go have unprotected sex with a bunch of hookers,
Hell yeah.
then, well, you're just going to have to deal with the consequences, right? I mean, every action comes with costs.
This ties really well back into what the gay marriage wedding cake thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But continue.
Just yeah. And I don't know if they were around for this, but the
Oh yeah, sure.
the gay wedding cake thing was should the government be able to force someone to make a cake for someone else if they don't want to do business? That is ultimately the question. The gay thing is completely superfluous. You might as well say should the government force a Muslim to make a cake for a Christian to make a cake for a gay person to make a cake for a straight person. I don't think the government should force
anybody.
anybody.
Sociologist.
Yeah. And I would say the government shouldn't force that, because ultimately the invisible hand that guides the whole thing, as long as we respect human rights,
self-correcting,
we'll get things done right, and we'll get people what they want much more efficiently than central planning.
Yeah.
And this ultimately relies upon human ingenuity.
Yeah, and it would be silly to assume that a centrally planned thing where there's people, a whole system of people acting of their own free will, self-corrects and naturally gets to a result much quicker than people planning for a bunch of people, and then because there's just more people on the job, basically. I don't really know how to articulate it super well, but I'm trying to think of how to articulate it. Do you know what I'm saying here?
I know what you're saying, and I'll give an example.
Yeah, thank you.
and this example actually touches us all, and it's a very controversial example, and I'll probably be showing an awful lot of my own hand in what I believe by even bringing this example up. So, in the United States, there exists the Federal Reserve Bank, which is a group of banks that has essentially amassed unto itself the right to do whatever it wants with the monetary supply, due to the fact that it has the government in its hip pocket, because the government requires taxes to be paid in US dollars. And since the only maker of US dollars is the Federal Reserve, they're married to each other, so to speak. So, what kind of an impact does it have if the Federal Reserve prints another dollar and adds it to circulation? That bringing that additional dollar into circulation just means that, as a marker of what's been made, there are more markers, but still the same amount of stuff made. Now, if, let's say we have 100% inflation, or, 100% inflation is a good place to start. So if all of a sudden, tomorrow morning, we go into the store and see everything costs exactly twice what it costs now. If I could buy a loaf of bread for $2 now, tomorrow it would cost me $4. That, I think, we would be perfectly fine with if in our bank accounts every single dollar that we have turned to 2.
So, can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so is it fair with how money circulates? So, when they do want to increase circulation, do they have to do it gradually? Because the way money works, kind of like, it circulates and then it finds who to go to, right? But it doesn't happen instantly, right?
It doesn't happen instantly, and that is where the problem. That is where the problem lies. First off, because you're forcing people to use a particular currency. Like you're not saying, okay, you and I can engage in transactions using the turds from our toilet bowl as money. I mean, we should be able to if we want to, right? And then we could counterfeit more money by eating more and crapping more.
Yeah.
I mean that'd mess with our economy a lot, but that sort of a thing we could feasibly, and for the sake of argument, say that.
And our reputation.
Yeah. But then, and Bitcoin, we could decide, okay, I'll give you Bitcoin for this, or I'll give you whatever it might be, gold or silver or precious jewels or freaking blocks of salt or bales of tobacco. All these different things that have been used throughout history. Little seashells with carvings in them. We should be able to make deals with whatever we want. We shouldn't be forced to use some other money come up by what amounts to essentially a group of other people that have decided that that's what we're going to pay our taxes with.
Yeah.
And that everything needs to be taxed. You put all of those together, and that equals compulsion. And since there is the idea that the printing takes place, well, how does the money get introduced into the economy? That's the other question. The bank introduces the money into the economy by buying financial assets. So the bank can go and buy government bonds. And that means that the government goes and decides where the money is spent. So if politicians have friends, then you can be like, okay, well, we'll send the money into these projects that are these things that we care about. And so the things that the government officials care about turn into where all the money flows, and then it generates all of this false demand for these products and services just because you're making more stuff. If the government decides they want to build a road to nowhere, then all of these people are going to be providing concrete and working crews and asphalt and paint and gravel and all these other different things to build a road to nowhere. But then when people realized that this road to nowhere was useless and all of these resources were misallocated to build this road to nowhere, introducing all that extra money into the system did absolutely nothing except for build a road to nowhere and take the money away from something that other people might have actually wanted.
Okay, so the big difficulty in this whole situation is where to introduce the money and who is introducing the money and stuff like that. Or that's not the big, but one of the huge difficulties that have.
Well, that's ultimately the central difficulty because.
Okay, so it is
because then by the printing of the money, because it doesn't evenly go to everybody at exactly the same time, it by definition creates economic cycles. And the reason I say that is because if there's so much human capital available at any given point, So let's say the same crew that would have been pouring a concrete foundation for a house that I'd be building had to go and pour concrete to build this road to nowhere. That means that I wouldn't be able to build my house. That means all the the entire economy revolving around me building my house would have been displaced.
Yeah.
And a whole lot of money that would have been associated with that would have been funneled in the other direction in order to get some extra of the money that the Federal Reserve was printing and giving to the government by buying bonds, which is not even giving to the government but demanding it back.
And so I have a question as well.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so in the same way that, like, when you're in physics, right, when there's no perfect machine, right, like you lose some efficiency. Is it fair to say that resources never get allocated exactly how they're supposed to be?
Well, I would say that if you have a central bank, they never do. But if it is, and if it's completely decentralized, you risk running into anarchy.
Right. So it's a balance.
So it is balancing that, but I would say that the balance should exist to the point where people can pick whatever medium of exchange they want, and then, amongst them, arrange whatever system of governance they think is appropriate that won't overstep boundaries and do things that they shouldn't be doing. Which is, it's a very tall order. It's not like this is just an easy exercise you give to fifth graders and say, hey, solve it, and then expect that the solution will be anything better than people would have come up with in all of history. You might get a group of fifth graders that come up with something better. I'm not going to completely discount that.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, being able to print money, being able to generate things out of thin air, generate debt out of thin air, generate money out of thin air. Gives people the opportunity to manipulate the economy, and if people do realize that ultimately the currency doesn't have any intrinsic value, except for the fact that the government can point a gun at your head and tell you to pay taxes with it,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That.
Yeah.
Can you tell I'm a libertarian?
Who would have thought? So this all ties in quite nicely to your donkey with the kind of, is it the carrot or the stick type thing going on?
Yeah, and I don't think that you should be giving government bullets to use on citizens.
Nope, I agree. Interesting. That's great. This is really interesting.
Yeah, we're using different varieties listing different varieties of coercion here, and the only thing I would say is that I should be able to coerce you or Stephen, and you and Stephen should be able to coerce me, and David should be able to coerce Jacob and whoever, but not through threat of violence, but through giving something that we want. In other words, of being constructive, of engaging in mutually agreeable behaviors. And I would say that ultimately, the idea that we all implicitly consent to the government that we're born into is a load of horse crap. Because tell me, how many people actually understand that very little thing about how the Federal Reserve works? What percentage of the U.S. population do you think even has a clue?
Let me guess.
I don't know.
I have no idea, but I'm going to say less than 50%.
Probably. Which means that you can't democratically expect anybody to come up with any appropriate conclusions regarding the matter.
Right. So then political opinions and stuff is gets kind of muddled. Yeah.
So screwing with the monetary supply is a pretty risky business.
I think this is sort of a synthesis of things we've been talking about. I think in a curriculum, this sort of thing should be included, like for high schoolers and stuff. Like
Oh yeah.
this needs to be necessary to know.
Yeah, right
like,
along with civics.
Yeah. So I think that's a good curriculum, a good addition to the curriculum, or to curriculum.
I think Aristotle was a libertarian. I'm not too much into Aristotelian philosophy. You would have to ask. I can actually go and find history. Mr. Sanderson, are you familiar with Caleb Beers? Caleb Beers is another YouTuber. He has 600 some subscribers, or 700 something like that. He's absolutely excellent at this sort of a thing. And he has definitely, off the top of his head, much more knowledge of Aristotle than I do. Less than 10% of America will even know what the Federal Reserve does. Yeah, that would probably.
Yeah, I agree.
Probably. 0. Yeah, it rounds down to 0.
But yeah, that's funny.
Oh, wow. But I lost track. I'll go and search out Caleb Beer's YouTube channel and put the.
And can you answer Ale's thing? Here's an interesting limit case argument. The current system is an expression of an underlying libertarian system.
Hang tight. I can't think and copy paste at the same time.
Okay.
Alright, into the description I put a link to Caleb Beer's YouTube channel. I know that if you wanted to ask him about Aristotelian philosophy, he would be more than interested in expounding on the subject with you. I mean, I would too, but right now I can't exactly just go crack open a book of Aristotle and still try to continue a stream. So here we are. Here's an interesting limit case argument. The current system is an expression of an underlying libertarian system. Alright, Ale, you got some explaining to do. You got some explaining to do there, buddy. So while Ale formulates his thoughts, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I do not. All I know is I learned a whole bunch of shit that I had no about before this. In high school, I learned about a little bit about the 3 branches of government. I learned about the judicial, the executive, and and then the judicial, the executive, legislative.
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell how much that's I learned about that. I learned about a little bit of history. I learned about sort of dates that I forgot all the dates that I learned, but I learned about them. I learned the dates because those mattered by themselves apparently a lot.
Yeah, the dates mattered an awful lot more than what actually happened.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's the case, right? Exactly. Completely. So yeah, no, I mean, this is all just extremely new to me and really enlightening. And I'm probably going to end up rewatching parts of the stream just to further synthesize it and then read about that stuff. So yeah.
Sounds good to me. I mean, I'm probably going to wind up rewatching the stream just so that I can put some timestamps in and put them in the description for people to follow.
Oh, yeah.
Alright, so imagine he sets up a hypothetical libertarian system. The system naturally evolves to the current state. Well, in that case, just go and say that authoritarianism is actually the basis of all of this. Because libertarianism is reactionary to authoritarianism. Or go and say that this is the consequence of anarchy, because anarchy was ultimately what we wound up having in the beginning. Except, no, we didn't, because there were still hierarchical systems of power in existence before. I mean, human beings have never subsisted in a power vacuum. Something has always taken the place.
Down the rabbit hole.
So you could somehow argue the current system is the result of inherent expression of libertarian behavioral expression. You could somehow argue that, but you'd be wrong. I would say that the current system is the result of inherent expression of human behavioral expression. People cannot subsist in a power vacuum. And if you are not well educated, and if you are not incredibly strong-willed, you will be easily persuaded to give up your own autonomy to somebody else who promises you something you want in exchange for it. Which means that societies go in cycles. And this is one part of the cycle of good times produce weak men, produce bad times produce strong men, produce good times produce weak men, and so on. Yeah, people don't want freedom. Of course they don't want freedom. Or at least most people don't. Or at least people want freedom, but they don't want the responsibility that goes with it. Because it means actually it means being educated about the things that are going on. And people would much rather outsource the being educated part to somebody else, but still want to have the benefits of being free. In this situation, it is impossible to have your cake and eat it too. David Sanderson says, my issue with collectivism is that it ignores individual rights. When individuals don't have rights, who can say that groups have rights? You can just sacrifice entire groups for bigger groups. Yeah, well, that's not off topic, actually. Because the topic of rights is inextricably intertwined with this whole thing. Because there's constantly this question of what can and cannot I do. And is it really okay? I can and cannot do whatever my power will not let me do. Like, what can I get away with without getting killed, or jailed, or fined, or something? I mean, the interesting thing is all of these systems are predicated upon an outside set of morals, which actually goes back to something that one of you said earlier, but I can't remember who it was. I think it was Jacob Blank, when we were talking about objectivism versus subjectivism. And what it is that we've been talking about this entire past, 45 minutes or so? We're operating under the implicit understanding that most, if not all of us, have grown up understanding Judeo-Christian values. If Judeo-Christian values, and I suppose on top of that, Greco-Roman philosophy, were not the centerpiece of our civilization, we would have things looking very different than what they do today. Because we would be valuing different things. We're having this discussion about human rights because human rights were important to the Greeks and to the Romans and to Christians. But if we go and we look at other societies and what they were predicated upon, you would obviously have societies that are generally taking the shape to get what they value. And certainly there are elements of humanity that people want all sorts of different things, but in different places, and people have grown accustomed to and wanting things in different amounts. I would say that out of pretty much anywhere in the world, people in the United States want freedom more as a whole than in any other place. But then, because the United States is such a big place, there's still a whole lot of freedom to be taken away from others. And so the government has, especially all of the bureaucracies with no oversight, with huge budgets. Early humans were certainly libertarian. The system evolves to have leaders who then might make decisions that people don't like, for example. Yeah, and they evolved to this. Yeah, and I think that if the system evolves to have leaders who make decisions that the people don't like, those people should be able to take the leaders out and shoot them. Of course, the system now doesn't allow for that.
Yeah.
But back in tribal days, if you didn't like the leader, people would overthrow him, and that overthrow was more often than not of a very bloody nature.
Oh, and Ala, is it fair to say that it's not closed under evolution? Like, is it fair to say that different cases of libertarianism across, I mean, I don't really know much about the different political sects, so excuse me, but is it fair to say that those cases would be analogous? Like, say the first, as you say, like original humans being libertarian. Would you say the next evolution of libertarianism, is it fair to say it's analogous? Like, you know, I don't know. I don't know. I'm assuming that's what you were saying when it's not a closed system. Could be wrong.
Oh, we'll just wait for him to answer. It seems like we evolved straight into miscellaneous for our last half hour.
Right in this lane. Are we going to cover Susanna's the article thing?
That might actually be a good segue for our next one, in between our articles and our educational segment.
Okay, yeah, good idea. We'll keep it for that. It's a good idea.
All right, Mr. Sanderson says people like M. Harris believe the objective moral framework can be derived independently of God. Sorry, I got lost in the soundtrack. Well, the Greeks did so in the framework of gods, and Christians did so in the framework of God. And evolution providing a basic moral framework would mean that it would have to be entirely utilitarian. And I believe if we and I may be misunderstanding Jordan Peterson here, but I think that's a lot of what he does, is he actually explains why the construct of religion fits into the idea of evolutionary biology, and he maintains that people invented religions for this because those that did have these stories that began to explain the world over time provided cogent frameworks for people to work together and not kill each other in.
Oh, he said the music's a bit too loud, maybe.
Okay. Well, I will get rid of that.
Until the government.
Oh yeah, I was talking. I recognize that in the parlor as well.
Oh yeah. The I'm going to have to find some way of equalizing the volume in between the different things, because this already, I can't actually hear much of the music myself. It's very, very quiet in my own earphones, but then again,
All I says it has slightly deviating pattern. Bothering him.
Okay. So, feedback on the music before we continue. Can't hear it all. Did I?
He said that before your question.
Oh,
Oh, I can't hear the music now.
oh boy. So I think that was probably just the fact that one of the songs was recorded a particular way.
Maybe so. Yeah.
This is also a quieter song. So, yeah, I'm going to have to probably go and throw all these songs through Audacity and then equalize the volume. It'll get rid of the dynamic structure of the music a little bit, but it'll make it a little more tolerable so we don't have that.
Yeah, I could always make something.
All right.
Some music.
Music.
Yeah, I have Ableton.
All right.
But
well, many people would say that making a moral framework objective would just be consensus of many other subjective moral frameworks. And then another person would say, well, if there would be some authoritative moral framework imputed from outside, i.e. God, that would be another way of doing it. And so, interestingly, I don't know if we would get to ever having any given two people or any randomly selected two people necessarily concurring on the idea of what even constitutes a objective framework, an objective moral framework. Invariant interchange of basis. Oh boy. So yeah. When we start looking at where these terms are derived, you have to look at what the starting point is, and then wonder, okay, how fruitful is it to continue to trace it back to history as far as we know? Because ultimately, when you go further away in time, the boundary conditions become fuzzy. So, not knowing what the boundary conditions are can make this a lot more difficult. But then, just jumping straight into the present with no knowledge of context or the past can be equally bad and difficult. Yeah, local linearity, or local, or simply that in a locality a function is defined, and then outside of that, we don't really know what's going on. It doesn't even have to be linear. It could be sigmoidal. It could be freaking piecewise defined or whatever.
Yeah, that's good. I like that.
No, I think Allah is onto something. Although I'll bet you pretty much everybody here is tired, and we only have 20 minutes left of the stream. But if we all want to quit, I'm okay with doing so. But
I still.
All right, good. Well, in that case, we will come up with 20 more minutes of content.
Oh, that's a good question. How do you spot a bullshit argument? Well, any logical fallacy is a good way. Usually, I mean, I'll say my method of, I don't know. Usually, you can see. I don't know if I'm talking from personal experience only, this is a good. That's a good. That leads me into the different logical fallacies.
Oh,
and I will talk to you guys about my favorite one, or what I think is the most powerful one. So this is one way. Again, yeah, it's not the only way to see it. Yeah, that's fair. Some logical fallacies can't be found in the book, but you can say. But you can abstract from certain logical fallacies, and there's, they all, there's this, there's many others. Yes, I know it's all context dependent. That's the problem with answering this. But to spot a bullshit argument, you just see something that's inconsistent with your internal sense of logic. That's what I'll say. And that's free. But the problem is, not everyone's sense of logic is right, and you could be wrong. So I don't know how this question is just. Okay. I don't know.
Well, this question involves the conflation of currently existing power hierarchies and the domain of logic not being completely overlapped with each other.
Yeah. Right.
If we talk pure logic,
right?
Pure logic doesn't explain too much of anything.
Yeah, you're right. So there is, but then it's fair to say there's no given heuristic to how to spot a bullshit argument. It's just you take it as it comes.
Yeah, because different BS arguments are BS for different reasons.
Yeah, exactly. I think. Well, I can talk about the best ways the best ways to be able to spot bullshit arguments.
Oh, one of them is seeing, are the facts distorted?
Yeah.
Is anyone's position misrepresented, yours or the other person's?
Yeah, and I'll say that a good way to mitigate the possibilities of that happening is being very aware and understanding the intricacies of the systems that you encounter in your life, and recognizing where those fall through, or the contrived aspects of them and stuff like that, and how things work within them. And so honestly, just learning more and being more knowledgeable is a good way. I mean, and I mean, yeah, that's a good way to prevent it, I suppose. But
And I'm going to be a little risky here and
okay,
suggest something. Now, this is just a suggestion. I'm not going to go and say this is infallibly my position. But I've been toying more and more with the idea recently that if someone wants to argue something and they are not going from the same emotional basis as their partner in argumentation or the person with whom they're arguing, that sets people up for a lot of misunderstandings, because there's a lot of emotion contained in a word. And if a word has a different emotional connotation to one person than it does to another, that can often cause the ideas to be distorted even when the same vocabulary is used.
yeah,
And it simply because of the strength of some words that people choose and the emotional baggage that some people take into a conversation, people easily go past the point of sticking with common understandings of words and impute way more meaning than might have been intended, or way less meaning than might have been intended. And I'm not saying that everything boils down to down to arguing semantics, but you need to make sure that at least you're approaching things on the same level as the person with whom you're arguing. Because if you can't even agree on basic terms, then everything that is occurring is going to be fruitless until those basic terms are agreed upon. And once those basic terms are understood, an awful lot of the differences and misunderstandings may even melt away. So I think that first off, the point would be that both parties should be able to accurately articulate the other's point of view. Then, if that can occur, then a conversation can be had about them. But until that can occur appropriately, the conversation between the two people that are arguing will be fruitless.
yeah. Oh boy, comment section, man.
Yes, sirree. Yes, after C. Oh boy, I'm going back. Oh boy, yep. Well, this is good. This is really good.
Yeah, oh, yeah, I like this stuff.
All right.
Let's see if Philip can come up with a counterexample to A equals A. Oh God, doesn't that kind of go into the philosophical argument? Like, is a boat still the same boat if you've rebuilt or like, are you the same human because you shed like cells and stuff like that? Like, oh God, oh no, no. Oh my God. Oh gosh. This is always the great.
Okay, I'm gonna go hard. Woohoo! Mr. Christensen, awesome. I have different logic, though. Yes, Mr. Sanderson, we know.
Philip taps out. Oh my God.
Oh boy.
Logic is subjective. Oh boy, we're making all these. Is logic subjective, or are systems of logic subjective?
Oh boy. You guys. Well, we can talk about what we're going to talk about next time. We're going to find a couple articles. We're going to go over those the first hour. Then we're going to find something to segue into the topic of education, and it's probably going to be something along the lines of an article about the myth of the 30 IQ point communication range. Then our second hour is going to be education, and then our third hour we're going to start on the topic, or maybe a little bit before our third hour, we're going to start on the topic of economics, and then let that lead into a discussion of real world matters and devolve into the miscellaneous thing that's going on right now. Or evolve. Sorry, did I say devolve? Must have been a slip of the tongue.
Looks like I imprinted on you, Matt.
Rats.
And David Sanderson. IQ is a social construct like gender. True, I suppose. But, like gender, sends a signal.
Oh boy, I had to go and approve that comment. For Mr. Ballester.
Your ass is a social construct as well.
Oh boy. Yes, now we have to think of where exactly does the ass begin, and where exactly does the back and legs and hips end.
God, good point.
You know, and we have to answer that kind of question.
I think it's a topological problem. I think if you and not in the way that Thomas West was using them, in a more crude way.
Oh, really? Yes. There's literally a paper on that. Oh no.
Oh boy. The penis is a social construct.
That's horrible.
So does that mean when people call me a dick, it doesn't mean anything?
No, it's just a social construct. I suppose it's the same when people call me an ass.
Yeah. It's like, well, what do you mean by that?
I mean, it's a social construct.
Kind of a bat.
Yeah, it could be kind of a bat, could be kind of a leg. And who knows, I might have a hole.
Does a hair count?
It got past peer review. The penis is a social construct. Oh boy.
Oh my.
I think I'm gonna have to like.
Who are the peers?
Send me a message later, Ollie, about that, and I'll look it up. But I'm gonna have to recover from this stream before I do anything.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, Mr. Sanderson.
Mr. Sanderson.
Oh boy. Oh boy. There are so many other things that we can discuss. I think that it'll be really cool once we get to the point of having more in-depth economic conversations. Of course, when we take things back to first principle, we'll realize that an awful lot of the things that we've been discussing are economically related. From the very beginning, yeah, math is a social construct. Yep. They're math.
Mm-hmm. They're man.
Ah, yes, the postmodern era, where everything devolves into emotional expression.
Oh boy.
I'm using math. Oh, help.
Astute. Insightful. It's fine. Yeah, topologically speaking. That's funny.
Do I dare even go look at the comments?
Well, I said they were talking about how genitals are a spectrum, and then not Yova, and Ale said, topologically speaking, no more. Not so not. Oh my God.
I'm wondering about hermaphroditism. So now, for these last few minutes, I'd like to know, what are some things that you would like to see on upcoming streams, or regarding the layout, or regarding the way we do things? Basically, please leave your feedback in the chat and in the comment section, because I would love to be able to continually modify this to be what you guys need it to be. Otherwise, you guys aren't getting your the maximum amount of utils out of the time, and I want to be able to maximize the amount of utils that you get out of this stream.
Yeah. Utilitarianism. See. I would consider this a difficult question, so I'm assuming there's going to be a relative pause in the comments. What people think.
Well, that's fine. In the meantime, I'm interested in knowing, what do you think? Like, do you think the one break is enough? And do you think that we should do like about an hour and a half in, or?
Yeah, I like the intermission.
Like a 5-minute break, an hour and a half, hour 40 minutes in.
Yeah.
All right.
I think that works well.
And I think that I'm going to have to prepare about 30% more content than I did for the previous time, because having it devolve for 40 minutes instead of 20 minutes is a little bit too much, I'd say.
Well, there was kind of a limbo state where it wasn't quite devolved. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but the process had begun. It was just a question.
Right. Because we went deeper and deeper into it, and then it just everything turns into semantics at some point, and then
Mm-hmm.
and then
Yeah. So I would say I'll get about 30% more content for the next time, at least. We'll definitely have the intermission again.
Yeah. Jacob Blank says devolution is fun though, but that's why we leave the 20 minutes instead of 40.
Mm-hmm.
Too much of a good thing is a bad thing.
Loud, high-pitched noises in my room. Oh, help. Just drink lots of soda before going to bed. Make sure I have loud, high-pitched noises in the room.
David has some great.
Oh, perfect. Allah wants to maximize his sleep time. Could we please discuss that? Yeah, go to bed. Drink lots of coffee, too. Well, I drank 750 mils of coffee. I drank, 500 mils of Coca-Cola Zero. Probably about 750 mils of milk. Are you saying that I haven't had enough? Huh?
How much do you think this cup is that I'm holding?
Let me look.
If I filled it up to wine. That's how it is compared to my head.
400, 500 mils, maybe? No, maybe 350, 400.
Because it's quite interesting.
What is it? Did you say Shakespeare's Pub?
Shakespeare's Pizza.
Oh, pizza.
Yeah.
Okay, so have to let me know, how close to a university was this pizza shop?
Very close.
Okay.
Extremely close. Like on the campus. Actually, where I'm living next year is about 100 feet from this pizza shop.
All right. So that means you're going to have to take frequent bike rides to get yourself far away from it.
I think the price of the pizza there will do that for me.
Ah.
But I will be doing I've been doing bike rides every day until and incrementally increasing it and getting. So yeah, it's been fun.
Well, the 4-7-8 breathing technique, that's a very useful one.
Is that an aspect of mindfulness? Perchance, I know
It can
breathing.
be if you're paying attention to your breathing, and it really the four whether it's 4-7-8 or longer or shorter, it doesn't matter too much. There are multiple different breathing patterns that can work in concert and help. Ah, Mr. Beers is here.
Yes.
And is just at the time where we're about ready to close the stream.
It's
It's like literally 1 minute away
like
from
Ale.
7 o'clock.
It's exactly like Ale for one of the last parlors shows up towards the.
Yes, sirree.
There, and he's like, "Hi, guys."
But yeah, we may want to have a little, or at least I know I'd like to have a little chat with Mr. Beers after this whole thing is over.
Yeah.
But I'm incredibly thankful for everybody that decided they were going to show up. So far, we are right into that point. So, thank you all for coming. I hope this has been useful for you. And I invite you to, after you've gotten some sleep and given a chance to give some feedback, to give that feedback so we can continue to improve things. We'll talk to you later. Bye.